Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the fifth meeting in 2014 of the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee. Can I welcome members, our witnesses and guests in the gallery. And I can remind everybody, please, either to turn off or at least turn to silent all mobile phones and other electronic devices so they don't interfere with the sound system. We have apologies this morning from Hanzala Malik, and we're joined by Jenny Mara as a substitute. Welcome. Now, item one on our agenda is the continuation of our inquiry into Scotland's economic future post-2014. And I'd like to welcome our first panel of witnesses. We're joined by Robert Kilgour, who's the Chief Executive of Dow Investments and Chairman of Renaissance Care Scotland, Rupert Soames, who's the Group Chief Executive of Agreco, and Norman Springford, who's Chairman of Apex Hotels. Welcome to you all. I should say we're going to have a fourth member of the panel, Dr. Maitland Mackey, who, for understandable reasons, has had to withdraw. He's suffered a recent bereavement, so I'm sure we send him our best wishes. Now, I think, given the time constraints, rather than have opening statements, we'll go straight into questions, gentlemen. I would remind all members, in view of the constraints, that they can keep their questions as short and focused as possible. And similarly, if we can have short and focused answers, that would be very helpful. If you'd like to come in response to a question that's perhaps directed at somebody else, if you just catch my eye, and I'll try and bring you in as time allows. I wonder if I can maybe just start by asking all of you a general question. What would a yes vote in the referendum in September mean for your business? Maybe Mr. Soames, do you want to start?
I think that in terms of businesses, I think you may get very different answers depending on what the nature of the businesses are, whether they are purely domestic businesses like typically sort of hotels or care homes that have the majority of their business being within Scotland, and businesses such as ours, where out of 6,500 employees, only 10% are in Scotland. 25% of our payroll taxes are paid in Scotland, but actually we manufacture here and we export to over 100 countries. So I think you may find differences of concern and approach. There are 5 areas where I think we have concerns. One is around administrative complexity and cost, putting borders where borders no longer currently are. No, sorry, not currently there. Currency, EU, taxation to an extent, and also energy, which happens to be our business. Those would be the 5 main areas of our concern.
Mr. Kilgour.
Well, I'm, as Rupert said, most of my business, I do have some businesses that cross-border, but my main business at the moment employs 750 people in Scotland and is headquartered in Musselburgh and operates throughout Scotland in the care home sector. And I'm endeavouring to continue doing what I've done for the last 30 years, which is to attract investment and create jobs in Scotland. And while I accept that Scotland could survive as an independent country, and I certainly would not leave the country if it did become independent, if there was a yes vote in September, I firmly believe that independence would not be in the best interest of either Scotland or the Scottish people, and certainly not for my business prospects in all of my businesses, both from the point of view of attracting investment and therefore creating more jobs in Scotland.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Springford.
Convener. I think my view of this thing is that, may I nail my colours to the mast and say this will very much be a union flag. I'll be flying in this one. We're a small Scottish company. We have something like 800 employees mixed between Scotland and the rest of the UK, mainly in London. We've consulted with a large number of our employees informally. The message is that we are probably all in exactly the same boat. We have concerns. We are concerned about the uncertainty that the whole process is creating. We are concerned about the lack of clarity of message that's coming out from both sides of the debate. And we certainly see that if there is a yes vote in September, we equally will not leave Scotland. We will effectively make good with the bad legislation that is there. But it will have an effect on the future job prospects of our employees, and that is their main concern.
Can I just ask you to expand on that very last point? I mean, what would you see being the negative impact of a yes vote in terms of your business prospects?
In terms of a yes vote, there are two parts. There's the current situation, where the uncertainty, the currency debate, for example, is causing many of our employees quite a difficulty. What are we going to be paid in? How are we going to trade? Are we going to have less or more taxation? A number of issues like that. If it goes past the September issue into an independent situation, then they are concerned that the rest of the UK and the rest of the world will see Scotland as a small entity. Their job prospects will be constrained, particularly if the currency is that they are no longer dealing in pounds. They don't see, when we speak to them informally, they are worried about mortgages, levels of taxation, and just the general uncertainty. But we're all, I think, scratching our heads here saying, why on earth do we need this? What are we expecting to gain from independence? And that is the current situation they're in. That may, of course, improve, but at the present, that is their worry.
Okay, thank you. Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, gentlemen. Maybe direct my question first to Mr Kilgour, and maybe the other members would like to come in after that. What impact on your business would there be if the UK were to leave Europe?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I don't see my main business at the moment, Renaissance Care, is totally focused in Scotland. Employs 100% of its employees in Scotland, operates purely and simply in Scotland. I suppose the only impact, if there was a no vote and then the UK left the EU, would be in regulation, maybe area of regulation, as we do have a number of European regulations that obviously affect our business. But our main business and there are big differences between Scotland and England in care. There's a free personal care in Scotland, and at the moment, although it's certainly likely to change, is that with COSLA and the one point of negotiation for care homes in Scotland as opposed to in England, I feel that Scotland is a good climate at the moment for the care home sector. I would be... But
just sticking to the question in terms of impact on your business.
Well, I don't see, other than regulation, if we left, if the UK left the EU, certain regulations, I don't see any impact.
Mr Somers, you're a big fan of Europe. What impact?
I'm a big fan of everything.
Oh, great.
But like everything, it can always be open to areas of improvement. I think the issue on the EU, I mean, if I just say, is that constitutional crises are like trams.
No, I want to say in a business perspective rather than a political one.
The constitutional crises are like trams in Princes Street. You wait 500 years and then two come along together. I think there is a constitutional car crash. Potentially, of a combination of Scotland negotiating separation from the rest of the UK and the UK negotiating its
the question is on your business
and that is not going to be helpful at all. I think in terms of the EU is very important to our business. It negotiates the trading agreements under which we export and get trade protection across the 100 countries in which we do business. We need to be under the coattails of a big trading bloc to be able to make those deals and to give us the support and to be able to negotiate those major trading arrangements. If you come back from that and say, well, do you think that would it matter if the UK left the EU?
That was the question.
I would say, well, personally, I think it would be highly damaging. to business. But at least one can imagine that the UK is a big enough trading entity to be able to cut its own deals in the wider world. I would have grave reservations about Scotland being able to negotiate with China, India,
We're making a very good job of it at the moment in terms of business coming into Scotland, in terms of the business coming in. We've had a record success. Mr. Swigford.
As a hospitality sector member here, I don't think it's actually going to create a great deal of difference to us whatsoever, mainly because 80% of our market is UK domestic market. So whether we're in the UK, in the Eurozone or not is really of no consequence to us.
You were at great pains to go on about the currency in the answer to the convener's question. With regard to the currency, I mean, obviously you're aware of the Fiscal Commission working group report. In terms of the option, which one would you prefer as business people if there were a yes vote? What would be your preference? I mean, the Fiscal Commission have come out with the report. What would be your favoured option?
Well, I'm hoping there's not a test on this one, but certainly looking at the issues, I can see the dangers that if the pound is denied to Scotland, as the state case seems to be, I cannot envisage...
What would be your preferred option? Forget the politics for a second.
Okay,
forget
right.
the politics. As a
what
business,
would our preferred option be? I really can't see a good option, any option.
Sterling currency, no? Would you not prefer to keep the sterling?
Not keeping sterling, no. The risks...
You wouldn't want to keep sterling if there was a yes vote. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't want to keep... If there was a yes vote, I would wish to keep sterling, but I would not wish to keep sterling under the option that if the UK, the rest of the UK decided it was not an option for Scotland to take that sterling, okay. I wouldn't like the alternatives.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Solms?
If the Scottish people vote for independence, my preference would be for an independent currency, because I don't see any way that, having said that they want the benefit of all that independence can bring by way of freedom of manoeuvre and ability to set their own policies, I think that the only option that will allow an independent Scotland the freedom to plough its own road, to set its own tax and fiscal policies, will be our own currency.
And that's your business preference?
It's not my business preference.
That's what I was asking them. What would be your business preference in terms of if there were a yes vote?
I think that some form of alignment with sterling would be preferable but not necessary. The worst possible outcome, I think, would be an unstable currency union. The second worst would be what you might call the Panama option. The least bad would be an independent currency. But
you're getting me confused. But I think you were getting me slightly confused in terms of I was asking from your business perspective that you favoured your best option for your business. I was just really looking for a very direct answer on that question.
Well, certainly from my point of view, in my view, from my business interest, the best would be sterling, without any doubt, whether that was in a formal currency union or in option 2, as Rupert said.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Lots of members desperate to come in and pursue some of these questions. Margaret McDougall first.
Thank you, and good morning, gentlemen. Just continuing on the currency aspect, we've heard that the option is not there to continue as part of a currency union, and we haven't heard a plan B if we were to become independent. But what do you think would be, you've already intimated your thoughts on your preferences. But there would be transaction costs if it was not the pound and it was not part of the currency union. Could you perhaps enlighten us on what you think the costs, transaction costs, would be to your business if we were in an independent Scotland that had either a completely independent currency or was part of sterlingisation?
In our business, I'm delighted that the First Minister raised the issue of transaction costs, because actually currency is probably the very least of the transaction costs that we would have in addition as part of our business, and we can maybe come on to the complexity and the borders issue. If in terms of the currency, we manufacture all of our output here in Dumbarton. So effectively, everything we buy will have currency risk, and everything we sell will have a currency risk, and that will be linked to, in the case of an independent currency, a currency that is going to have a very significant weighting towards the fortunes of North Sea oil. It's going to be a petro currency. Could we hedge that? Yes, we could. We hedge currencies the whole time. What might it do to our costs? I cannot tell you precisely, but my best guess would be that it might cost us 2 or 3% of our manufacturing costs, and those run at about sort of £400 million a year, handling those things, and that's not a scientific number. Whereas if we were in a sterling area, obviously we would not have those costs.
And is it going to make any difference to your businesses, Mr. Springford and Mr. Kilgore?
I think if there wasn't either sterling official currency union or a looser arrangement, and it was the Scottish pound standing on its own, the biggest impact, as all of our business is done within confines of Scotland, I would have said that the biggest impact would be the cost of finance. If there was an impact on with the different currency on the cost of finance to the business, might affect our investment decisions, creating more jobs. But as we deal at the moment within the one currency area, it would remain within that same currency area. We don't have any, for example, we don't have any. I have in the past had care homes throughout the UK, but we don't at the moment have any, so it wouldn't impact on that.
Mr. Springford.
In our particular business, there are several levels of what you may describe as transactional costs. The simplest one is that there would be precious little effect on our business dealing with our customers and our guests, because we currently operate in multi-currency anyway. There would be transactional costs or administrative costs dealing with the differences in employees in different parts of the UK. But probably most importantly would be the effect of having a separate currency on, as Rob says, our views with the rest of the UK and the rest of the world. How do we protect against currency fluctuations? How do we protect against risk? Is that risk involve us in greater interest charges? And it's those transactional costs which I think are difficult to quantify, but are of more concern to us than, shall we say, the basic administration transactional cost.
Okay, then, if I could just...
Yeah, one more, Margaret.
It's really just on what you have just said, Mr. Springford, and I think Mr. Soames mentioned as well, or was it Mr. Kilgore, the business costs relating to risk and the finance side, where, if you're looking to borrowing and, future investment in your company, so you would see that as riskier if we were outside.
If we were outside the sterling, it was treated in a different way, whether you call it sterling or not call it sterling. If we are different from the rest of the UK in the way our currency is seen, then yes, that is a high risk to us.
Well, I would say the same. It's a borrowing cost as a hindrance to our I mean, the biggest problem in all the SME businesses that I both own and am involved in, access to finance, issues over SME bank lending is a big issue for me, has been for the last few years and still is, and I think it would be even worse. Well, that's my fear, is it would be even worse under a standalone option B or plan B of Scottish pound off its own.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want us to stick with the currency issue because I know a couple more members have got a follow-up. Mike McKenzie?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I wonder if any of you gentlemen have read the Fiscal Commission paper, their first report, which deals with currency. And one of the things that interested me, because the gentleman that wrote that had impeccable credentials, a couple of Nobel Prize-winning economists, but in that paper they say that they anticipate that the politicians will do a lot of posturing at this stage while the campaign's on, but afterwards, after the vote, and assuming a yes vote, that they would then become much more sensible. From your business perspectives, don't you agree with me that, assuming the people of Scotland express their democratic wish in a yes vote, that it would behove the politicians, both in Scotland and down in Westminster, to adopt a sensible approach with regard to currency and indeed any other administrative arrangements?
I think it would, but I think they've made...
Thank you. That's all I need.
Mr. Kilgore, I think you can carry on.
I think it would, but I think they have made their position very clear. I'm just a simple businessman. I'm not a politician, so I mean I don't understand if they're going to say categorically it's not an option, and there is no at the moment on the table plan B. Then that does give both me concern, but also gives the sources of investment, both in London and abroad, that I speak to on a regular basis and look to for financing projects in Scotland. It does give them a lot of concern, the uncertainty of that. And certainly it has put a few projects that I've been looking at on hold for the time being.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Soames, I'd be interested.
Yeah, sensible. If I may say, sensible is A, in the eye of the beholder, and B, which end that you think. Now, it may well be sensible from the point of view of the Scottish people that there is a currency union. It may not be sensible from the point of view of the 55 million other people in the rest of the United Kingdom that they take on a risk.
With the greatest respect,
let me finish. Please let me finish. You asked me a question, and I'm going to answer it. Okay? You asked me whether it would be a sensible option. I'm sure everybody will try to be sensible, but it is far from clear to me that it will be sensible for the rest of the UK to enter into a currency union with Scotland without Scotland being tied up tighter than a kipper in terms of its all the fiscal and tax responsibilities, because you have to say, well, why should they? And if you want my opinion, part of my assessment of the risk of this is I think that the rest of the UK will be absolutely serious in saying that they will not have a currency union. They will not want to take that on. And I think the people who think that this is just bluff and bluster, I think the Treasury are absolutely serious about this. And they've got the example of what's been going on in the EU as their as the guardianship of what happens with unstable currency unions.
So you feel that, given a yes vote, that would have no detrimental effect on your business, located as it is in Scotland, if the politicians in Westminster continue to posture as they're doing at the moment?
I think that it may. I think that there are a number of ways in which an independence, Scotland separating from the rest of the UK and becoming independent would be damaging for our business. I think that currency is just one of them.
Thank you.
I think the answer, if I'm a guessing person or a gambling person, would be that we will retain in an independent Scotland sterling. It will be the Plan B will become the second option, the least favoured option in my view, in that we will inherit sterling and use sterling as our means of currency, but without the associated support from the rest of the UK. So that, I agree, it will become an unstable, or can become an unstable currency.
Right. Alison Johnson.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. Mr Kilgour, in your submission, for which I thank you, I agree with you entirely that the situation we have at present can be improved, but clearly, even with devolution, we are one of the richest nations in the world, yet one of the most unequal. And I think that is part of the reason that we have this great desire for independence amongst a large proportion of the Scottish population. And I agree entirely when you say that you believe that the UK's diversity is its greatest strength, not its greatest weakness. Unfortunately, that's not a view shared by a certain right-wing fringe party who seem to be dictating a lot of government policy at the moment. Do you feel that UK immigration policy is flexible enough to allow us to meet Scottish needs? We're already hearing instances in medicine, for example, where we do not have the specialist doctors that we need.
Well, it is a problem, recruitment. I mean, the biggest area of recruitment problem I have at the moment is, surprise, surprise, in Aberdeen. But if you're not involved in oil and gas and you're recruiting in Aberdeen, it is difficult. It's not just in the sector that I'm in. So recruitment is, and certainly we do look at recruiting. We're actually actively looking at recruiting from the northeast of England, actually, to come up to Scotland, and we're having some success with that. We're looking at expanding that. But my view, as I said in the statement, is that devolution is ever evolving, and I think with the Scotland Act 2012, I don't believe that it should stop at that. Those changes are coming in 2016. I'm a firm believer in more fiscal powers for the Scottish Parliament. I'd like to see it responsible for up to 50% of its budget, whereas I believe it's about 15% just now. And as far as the UK immigration policy, we recruit mainly from Scotland and, as I said, from England. We haven't as yet. We have people that work from us that come from abroad, but we haven't as yet gone actively recruiting elsewhere in the EU or further afield. But with certain staff shortages in certain areas, we have been discussing it as a possibility for later this year.
Okay, thank you. Mr Soames?
We don't have a recruitment problem in Scotland. We take on about 16 apprentices a year, and we choose from a list of 500 applicants. So we are spoilt for choice, and that's one of the reasons we like being here. We also take quite a lot of Scots from Scotland to go and work in Côte d'Ivoire and Yemen and all over the place. So there was a free flow. Where we have actually a recruitment issue is in the south, and of course we have a recruitment issue around Aberdeen, where that is difficult. But we don't see immigration policy UK-wide, as applied in Scotland, as being a big impediment to our business, though that is particular to our business. I know other businesses will have concerns about that.
Okay, thank you.
I took the question, Mr Johnson, to mean, would we like further devolved powers rather than how we are dealing with recruitment? But
or an immigration policy that was able to reflect particular needs in Scotland?
Our immigration policy, and I've said this, I think, at one of a panel many months ago, is that, unfortunately, both the Scottish and UK youngster is perhaps not as interested in hospitality, in particular, as perhaps in some other trades, and therefore a lot of our employees, not the majority, but certainly a large number of employees, are from EU countries. Particularly Eastern Europeans, and their work ethic, and unfortunately I have to say this, is much better than that of the Scottish or the rest of the UK. So in terms of immigration policy, we would continue what we are presently doing, which is we will recruit from throughout Europe or from the rest of the world for that matter.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps that's something we could look at under our tourism brief, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, follow up on this from Marco Biaggi.
Just a follow-up to the remarks from Mr Kilgour. You said that you supported additional fiscal powers. Can I ask why and what the benefits you see from those would be?
Well, as I've obviously stated both in writing and verbally, I'm in favour of Scotland remaining part of the UK, but I'm also in favour of devolution as an evolving process. I believed at the time it should be, and with the 2012 Act and the changes in 16, but I don't believe that should be it. I believe there should be more fiscal powers devolved to Scotland, and at the moment I believe it's around 15% of the 35 billion budget is responsible, the Scottish Parliament is responsible for. 50%, I have done a fair amount of reading on that lately, and I would be in favour of 50% of that, as well as other powers, not just fiscal powers, coming to Scotland, because I believe in further evolution of the devolution settlement, and I think that is by far the best way, both for business, for jobs, and for Scotland, is to have Scotland with more responsibility, particularly fiscal, but still remaining part of the UK. And I mean, obviously, a lot of members disagree, but I believe that you can have your cake and eat it in that respect, and that's my view, and I think that's best.
I mean, I'm trying to understand why you want to move up to 50% from the 15. What does that actually deliver in your mind?
Well, in my mind, what would that deliver? That would deliver a more settled view that Scotland, Scottish people, hopefully, would be happier to remain within the United Kingdom if they had more say in how the money was spent. So therefore would not go down the route of wanting to be independent. So that's and it all comes, from my point of view, it all comes down to what is best for attracting investment, what is best for its stability, certainty, and having more fiscal powers in the power of the Scottish Parliament would, in my view, make for more stability and more certainty, allowing me to attract more investment, create more jobs.
Right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Brodie.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. If I may direct my first question, Mr. Soames, I think as your much respected grandfather said, the Greeks, as much as the Greeks had developed the ancient world, so Scots, little Scotland, I think you said, had forged a large part of the modern world through innovation and entrepreneurship. I just wonder, in that context, in a statement in December, you said that your company was used to dealing with political risk in the likes of Yemen and Iraq. You then went on to say, I'm not saying the UK is on that scale, but you would be really surprised to know that the UK market for many international investors is in the high-risk category of political risk to investment. This is not where you would expect Britain to be. Why did you feel that, and what was the evidence for that?
That was specifically in relation to energy and energy investment, where, I mean, if I may say, the evidence is that I've been singing this song now for 3 or 4 years, is that because of the confusions and the difficulties of creating a new energy policy, there are inadequate numbers of new power stations being built. The old ones are being mothballed or taken out of service, and we're going to face a very severe issue over the next 24 months and probably over the next 5 years to do with energy. So, and part of that political risk calculation is not actually to do with Scottish independence, although there are significant issues around energy and Scottish independence for Scotland. It was about whether people are going to be prepared to fund building new power stations throughout the UK, given the uncertain regulatory environment.
Thank you. Just on that basis, then, if I may come back, there was a question asked earlier about Europe. Given the scenario where Scotland's trade has a trade surplus. The UK has a huge trade deficit, has had for some time. Scotland's fiscal deficit is much, much lower as a percent of GDP than the rest of the UK. And I could go on about borrowing in Scotland per head is much less than the rest of the UK. So do you not agree that, two questions, that Scotland is actually, and I won't go into the currency situation, but Scotland is actually in a superior economic position than the rest of the UK, which might have an impact on the decision on currency made by the Westminster government. But let me ask you a very direct question. What scares you most? Coming out of Europe or Scottish independence? Sorry, what scares you more, I should say? I'll ask Mr. Soames.
Mr. Soames
Initially, and Mr. Kilgour, I'm sure.
I don't think that's answerable. I think they are two completely different questions, and I think that, if I may say, it's a very clever question, but I don't want to go and compare two very different threats. It's like, which scares you more, the crocodile or the alligator or the orangutan? Well, they can both do you great harm, but I don't know which one scares me. And scares is not a word that I would use. We will adapt like human beings to all these circumstances, but both of them present severe risk to our business.
Okay. Certainly, the more immediate one, the one that we're dealing with at the moment, does concern me most, because it's there, it's on the table as happening in September. The second one, the EU, may not even actually happen. It's not, as I understand it, definitely in law that it's going to happen.
We're going to have two referenda
in 2017. It's not. It depends on the mainly depends, I suppose, on the election, the Westminster election in May 2015. Certainly, the Scotland leaving the UK is a one that does concern me the most, as it's the most immediate, and it's the one that's actually could happen, whereas leaving the EU is not something that at the moment is on the table.
Okay. Can I just, sorry?
Yes, if you wish me to come in. I think it follows on from the earlier statement I made that it probably makes little difference to us in hospitality whether we are part of the EU or not. In that, in our case, 80% of our market, as I say, is UK domestic market. So that's a reasonably simple answer to that one. Independence would scare us.
Okay. Mr. Kilgour, in your statement, I have two brief questions.
Two already.
Mr. Kilgour, you said that in your statement you really feel, and in fact have already found recently, that the threat of independence is a direct negative barrier to attracting investment and jobs in Scotland. Scotland has the highest rate of inward investment of all the regions. Where's your evidence?
Well, my evidence, other than the fact that, as far as I'm not able to mention names, direct names from the point of view of commercial confidentiality, but as far as what I can only say in the sectors that I'm involved in, particularly at the moment in the care home sector, that when I've been trying to attract from London and from abroad in the healthcare investment. Pardon?
It says
it does. It says that the threat of independence is a direct barrier. I have found in the last couple of years, healthcare investment funds in London and abroad that I have used in the past over the last 25 years have said to me, with the uncertainty over independence and the referendum and the currency, we're not prepared to do any projects. And these are people who have done projects in Scotland in the past 25 years until, they're not saying they won't do it post whatever happens in the referendum, yes or no. What they're saying is that at the moment, and this has been for the last couple of years, that they will not, until there's certainty, and they see what happens post September's referendum. They are not prepared to invest in projects that I've taken to them.
So you're talking from personal experience?
Yeah, totally.
Not a general statement.
No,
so you accept that Scotland has seen much higher...
No, what I say in my statement is I have already found recently.
Tom, do you want to come in?
Yes, I think we have to be realistic about this. The international capital markets have paid no attention at all to Scottish independence for until very recently. We have noted a marked increase in the nervousness and the questions that we're getting from investors in the last 6 months, and it's partly to do with the polls, because I think that most international investors have assumed that it won't happen. Now that the polls are getting closer, they are getting much more worried. And my prediction to you is that in the annual reports season that's beginning to come out now, you will see many more public companies based in Scotland quoting Scottish independence as being a risk that they have to account for in their business. And we are being asked by our shareholders on a much more regular basis. They are much more worried about it now than they were 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't think that you should comfort yourself that just because investment was being very strong until recently, that actually there is not there is not a change of atmosphere now, and people are much more worried about it than they were in the international capital markets.
So your shareholders wouldn't mind having another 10, which results 360 million profit before tax. If corporation tax were lower here, your shareholders would still be nervous, would they? They wouldn't want the 10.8 million additional income that would flow from a reduced corporation tax.
My shareholders, I think, would be sceptical about the ability to give major cuts in corporation tax without other cuts, without other increases elsewhere. What the Lord giveth, the Lord will taketh away. And we all know that the budget of an independent Scotland is not going to be so much in surplus that they're going to be able to cut taxes in one area while increasing them in the other. And I find it profoundly unlikely that a politically independent Scotland is going to say, look at that nice Mr. Soames and let's go and give all those companies a nice big tax cut, because then we can go and raise taxes on the poor and the needy. I do not think, as my grandfather once said, yes, I don't think.
Okay, thank you. We need to move on. Jenny Mara.
Convener, can I have 3 questions as well? Is that okay? I will be brief. The panel just started to talk about the first question I wanted to ask Convener, and that was the statement in Mr Kilgour's submission regarding the threat of independence. When I speak to business, sir, they tell me that actually this situation of uncertainty is having an impact on business, and it is precluding transactions, land transactions and agricultural transactions currently in Scotland. Now, you did say that you feel that the uncertainty is having an impact on your own business. Do you feel it's having an impact on the wider business community, and have you heard such stories?
Well, it's certainly, as I said, having an impact on some of the investment decisions. And in fact, I have put off a couple of investment decisions within my own company until after the referendum. And certainly business acquaintances, both family members of mine and a wider circle of business acquaintances that have businesses in Scotland, are finding it similar to me, notwithstanding the point that Mr Brodie makes about the increased level of investment in recent years. But I agree totally with what Rupert says. In the last, certainly in the last 6 months, as the polls have narrowed, there is much more nervousness. And I say I've put off a couple of decisions, and I know of some others that have done the same and said, we'll revisit this end of this year, this project end of this year, beginning of next year. And that's happened more in the last 6 months than before. But obviously, it's not something in the current economic climate. I mean, I have a view, as I said in my statement, that it's not government's job to create jobs, role to create jobs. It's people like us sitting here, and we need the climate of certainty and stability to allow us to attract the investment and we create the jobs that pays the taxes to allow you guys to decide on this, where to spend the money on essential public services. Well, that is becoming more of a concern, yeah.
Those couple of delayed decisions, Mr Kilgour, can you estimate for me how much of an impact that has on investment in the Scottish economy and perhaps how much of an impact that has on the number of jobs that you can create?
Well, both of them would involve construction work, so they're both involved in the short-term construction work that would be involved there, and then they both would employ maybe in total about 80 or 90 people once they're completed. And then there's the goods and services bought locally once those units are up and running. My firm belief is, and I'm a glass half full as opposed to glass half empty, is that I am hopeful and confident that it is a delay in these projects are not going to happen. They are going to happen, but for a variety of reasons, the main reason being the uncertainty and the concern, we've decided that just to consolidate, look after, run efficiently what we've got just now, and have those two folders there, oven ready, with the finance issue being the only one that needs to be completed.
And if there were to be, this is supplementary to my first question.
No, come on, you're getting three questions, you're on your third question.
If there were to be a yes vote in September, does that period of uncertainty actually continue? Because then we enter a phase of a year and a half of negotiations on currency, of EU membership and all of these things. So actually does a yes vote mean continued uncertainty?
It does mean, yes vote means continued uncertainty through to, I think is it March 2016 is the stated preference for the date or from the SNP of when independence would be. But obviously a lot of hard negotiations would have to be done, and that period of uncertainty, in my view, would definitely continue. As in fact, somebody told me last week in London that I deal with on a regular basis, that even a very close vote, they would still, for no, they would still be concerned about. They're looking at 25, 30-year investment in Scotland. A very close vote would mean maybe returning to another referendum, say, in 5 years' time. Because I say, once it's settled and there's a no vote, then surely we can get these projects going. They said, not necessarily.
So the whole process of this referendum is creating the uncertainty that your business doesn't need?
It doesn't need. We're managing and we're coping, as we all do, because we're in business. We cope, and we cope with the ups and downs. But it's uncertainty that we could well do without.
How attractive?
Hold on. I think you've had 4 questions, Ms. Marrow, okay? And other members haven't asked any questions, so if there's time at the end, I'll bring you back in. I know Mr. Allard has another chance to ask a question here.
Thank you very much, Convener, and good morning, and thank you for coming to answer our questions. It's very much appreciated because we need to hear from businesses like yourself to know what decision we should take in September. I was quite impressed with Mr. Kilgour so far answers, particularly on more powers, more fiscal powers, and maybe on more powers coming to the Scottish Parliament on migration, for example. What I would like, maybe not ask Mr. Kilgour, but Mr. Springford on one particular of his powers. I don't know if you support more powers for the Scottish Parliament, but a lot of Scottish-based businesses are talking about wanting to have more powers for the Scottish Parliament on air passenger duties. How do you think the response will be after a no vote, knowing perfectly well that over the years we've been asking and nothing came out of Westminster? Do you think Westminster government will listen?
I'm very much in the camp that I'm not particularly concerned, I'll rephrase that, I'm not particularly interested in further fiscal powers for, or devolved powers for Scotland. I'm perfectly happy with the Union at present and the way the system works. In answer to your specific query about air passenger duty, that is, I believe should still be a matter for the UK. if we look at London as the gateway to Britain for tourism, and we look at Edinburgh as the gateway to Scotland for tourism, air passenger duty clearly is an issue which would affect the whole of the country. And I believe that, quite happily, that it should be a UK matter.
So you're happy with the...
I'm happy with the present system. I'm not happy with the rate of tax.
You're not happy with the rate of tax?
But I'm happy that it is controlled by the UK government.
This is the point. It's the same point with immigration or with fiscal powers or anything else. If we've been asking for many, many years for these things to change, you know, in the interest of businesses like your businesses, you know, what hope will we have for the change of point of view?
I really don't see that is an independence type question. I see that as a UK matter.
So you think after no vote we should keep on asking, Scottish Parliament should keep on asking
for a number of things. In the British Hospitality Association, which we're members of, we're asking for many things. We're looking to revise VAT. We're looking. Yeah. You know, there are a number of issues, and air passenger duty is certainly one that would improve tourism. Yeah, no question of that.
You know, I can relate to that because a lot of us have been asking for change on VAT rates as well for the tourism industry, but we don't seem to go anywhere, just like in migration.
Well, I think that, as we've said before, there is a balancing the books necessary here. Whether that I would go to the Lord give it and Lord take it away, but at the end of the day, if we are hearing promises of reduced taxation and better services, at the end of the day, I've still got to say, well, how do you balance the books to achieve that objective?
What about Mr. Kilgour? Do you think that should be involved in more powers for the Scottish Parliament?
Well, I'm firmly of the belief that the Better Together campaign, which I can certainly declare I'm not involved in, but I have given them a small cheque recently. My firm view, and I told them this when I gave them a small cheque, was that the three main parties need to come up with a written response, in my view, to the SNP white paper. And it's something that I firmly believe they should. They need to put down in writing a more positive reasons for the Scottish public to vote no. All agreed by the three main leaders in London, so that it's signed up that there will not be any cuts in the, for example, in the Barnett formula. There will be actually setting out both reminding people what powers the Scottish Parliament has, both what powers it's going to get under the Scotland Act 2012 and 2016, which most members of the public, if you ask them, have no idea that these powers are coming in 2016. And the third thing is to say what a no vote will mean of more powers. And I've been campaigning for a written response to the white paper, and I'm very much in favour of that.
That's very interesting, because you did contribute to the Better Together campaign. Have you been asked, any of you, to contribute to something similar to white paper? I don't know if I would call it a black paper, but on the no side, you know, because I know in the white paper a lot of businesses, you know, have been giving input and direction of where they will want Scotland to go, in direction Scotland will go with a yes vote. Have you been asked to contribute to a document in the Better Together side?
I haven't. In fact, when I gave them a small cheque, I did say that I might consider giving them a little bit more if they came and said to me, we're putting a fund together to fund the production of a document.
Did you get an answer?
I haven't had a response to that as of today, certainly.
Okay. I'll let the others answer. We need to move on, though. Anything to add, Mr. Solms?
Yeah, all I would say, I have fairly strong views about the separation of Crown, State and business. I think business is fine to go and opine about something as radical as independence. I think there's all the difference in the world between independence on the one hand and further devolution on the other. We have no particular view on further devolution, and we wouldn't express it as in a way that we would as independence, because I think that the threat that the one poses to the risk that one poses for our business against the other.
Have you been asked to contribute to the Better Together campaign regarding having a similar document than the white paper?
No,
to articulate those thoughts?
I have not.
And would you like to contribute to it? Is it a genuine question?
No, look, I don't believe that businessmen should be campaigning on this. I think that businessmen should be answering questions that they're asked. And
having an input, maybe?
Okay, Mr. Allard, I think you've had your time. Mr. Springford can answer the question, and we need to move on.
If we should answer the question, yes, I have been asked to contribute, and I know I have not contributed. We do not make political donations as a company, and that's our policy.
What about
right? All right, thank you,
document?
Mr. Allard. Thank you. We need to move on. Okay, Mr. Biaggi.
Thank you.
Have successive UK governments, in your view, done enough to promote female participation in business, both at start-up levels and in higher echelons? And do you support the Scottish Government's emphasis on this, which can really only be delivered with independence?
Start the debate. I don't see it as the preserve of Scotland that gender equality is a main plank. It's a main plank in the UK policy as well, as far as I can see. We as a family company have, and I get into trouble with the HR department for saying this, but on our eight-person board, we have 4 accountants and 4 women, so God help us. But on a more serious note, yes, I don't see Scottish independence as being an issue for improving entrepreneurship with the female members in Scotland. I don't see that as an issue.
If I can say, this is an incredibly good example of complexity, how complexity and cost is going to come in. So we are a UK-listed company, our headquarters in Scotland, and you are suggesting that under Scottish government there would be greater move, more women on boards and within the workplace. Well, yes, and presumably the rest of the UK will have their own thing. And guess what? We'll have to have 2 separate policies where now we have 1. And I think that is a really good example of, because when Scotland, if Scotland becomes independent, Scotland will want to do things differently. Otherwise, what's the point of being independent? To us as a company who run across the UK in a completely integrated way, that is going to bring in another raft of different regulations and legislation that we're going to have to comply with, of which diversity will be just one.
Can I just say, before you give your response, that I've now heard 2 answers, neither of which gave the view on the UK government's record on female participation. So if you could address that, I'd be most grateful.
The sector that I'm mainly involved in, I mean, on our board we have two men, 2 women, and the majority, more than 50% of our, in fact I would say it's probably up near 70% of our senior managers are women. The rung below, if you like. That's maybe because of the sector, because of the nursing-based sector, although we do have some men in that next rung of senior management. But so it's never been, and certainly in the last 25 years that I've been involved in the care sector, I've had boards where the majority have been on women, and I find women better in most jobs. I've fired more men or let more men go for not being up to the job in senior positions than I have women, definitely.
So why then do you think, I think it's 20% of board appointees at FT100 companies are women? Only 20% seems rather small.
It does, and certainly my wife is campaigning for that in London within her own sector, within the financial services sector. And she's having some success, but some not success in that area. I can only speak for the sector that I'm involved in, and I certainly think that sector that I'm involved in has, maybe because of its nature, a higher percentage than even the UK, let alone anything that might be brought in under Scotland if it was independent.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I've got time for 2 very brief supplementaries, if both questioners keep them short. I think I propose, in view of the time, that we get both questions asked, and then the panel can respond. First of all, Mike McKenzie.
Thank you, Convener. And it's really just a question for Mr Solms in view of his strong feelings about Europe. He seems to be very pro-Europe, and I heartily concur with him on that. Do you not view the position of your company headquartered as it is in Scotland as a kind of insurance policy against the rest of the UK pulling out of Europe?
Right, okay. I'll hold that just thought for a second. I'll let Jenny Marrett ask her question and then come back to the panel.
Last week, TSB made the decision to incorporate down south rather than in Scotland. If the panel were incorporating tomorrow, would you rather incorporate in the rest of the UK, or would you be attracted by the SNP's promise of a corporation tax cut under independence?
Okay, thank you. Mr Solms first, maybe, and then bring in the others.
I don't see the EU thing. We would wait to see what happened. I don't regard it as a insurance policy, and frankly, headquarters can move very quickly. And so, no, we don't regard it as an insurance policy, but I do regard it as again, I think that it ill behoves people not to listen quite carefully to what senior EU people say and what senior Treasury people say, both about the currency and about EU membership. On the second issue of the TSB, I can't talk for, obviously I'm not a banker, I can't talk for banks. I would think my prediction would be is that very rapidly any banks will have to move their domicile down to London in terms of independence. They'll have to speak for themselves, but I think that they will need the protection of the Bank of England as a lender of last resort very quickly. Otherwise, their investors will be asking questions of them. To a company such as us, we want to be headquartered where all our, where our key people are and our manufacturing are. So, we're happy as clams where we are. We took a decision to go and build a new factory 5 years ago in Dumbarton. We'll stay there. The issue doesn't arise. But I think it would be driven more by. Don't think that where you are headquartered is a huge issue, because you could move a headquarters in 6 months if you want. So I don't think that is such a big issue. And as I say, we're happy as clams.
Okay.
I would make the point. My biggest concern, well, one, I would set up a company I've set up companies in Scotland or in England. It doesn't. It's where they operate as opposed to necessarily. But what would concern me most would be banks moving their headquarters, like RBS, for example, moving their headquarters to London, and the impact of that on access to investment and cost of that. So that would concern me for the reasons that Rupert mentioned. As far as different rates of corporation tax, I mean, I certainly again agree on that issue with Rupert very much, that sort of sexy tidbit of lower corporation tax really doesn't do it for me, because I don't see how that stacks up across the whole piece. It's the whole tax burden that I would be concerned about in an independent Scotland, as opposed to, one lower corporation tax by a couple of points. It's what the other taxes on business rates, on income tax, on everything else, on VAT, on everything that would concern me. I would need, and my view is it would be more taxes would have to be spread. My concern would be the effect of that on investment and jobs.
Okay.
And finally, may I give Convener a clear message on this one? I think we're a Scottish family company. We started in Scotland, we invest in Scotland, and of course we will continue to invest in Scotland. But as a board, we have made the decision that we will, over the next several years, focus our capital investment programme in London in particular. And that, I think, is a disturbing message, that if that is what a very patriotic Scottish company is prepared to do, then we will not relocate. That is not in our view at all. But if the message we are giving across is that we as a Scottish family company are considering England a better place to invest because there is less risk after independence, if that occurs, then that is perhaps a message that others who are investing in Scotland from outside Scotland may well be making similar decisions, and that is a concern to us.
Okay. I'm afraid the clock is caught up on us. We'll need to call it a day at that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in. It's been very helpful to the committee in our deliberations. I will have a short suspension to allow a changeover. Right, if we can reconvene. I'd like to welcome our second panel joining us today. Starting on my left, we have Dan MacDonald, Chief Executive of MacDonald Estates, Gordon McIntyre-Kemp, who's Chief Executive Business for Scotland, Jim McCall, who's the Founder, Chairman and Chief Executive of Clyde Blowers Capital, and Mary Macklin, who's Chief Executive of the Clun Group. Welcome to you all. Can I just remind colleagues we are obviously a little bit short on time this morning, so people can keep their questions short and to the point. And we've got quite a large panel, so I think rather than everybody try and answer every question, I'd ask people to direct the question at particular panel members, and then if you want to come in to respond to a question addressed to somebody else, so just catch my eye, and I'll bring you in as time allows. And obviously, if we can keep responses as short as possible, that would be very helpful in terms of getting through the topics in the time available. Can I maybe just start by asking all of you, maybe just start with Dan McDowell and work our way around. Scotland currently is doing well. The Scottish economy is the most successful part of the UK economy outside of London and the South East. Why do we need to be independent if we're doing so well?
Well, I think it's the world that's changing at an unprecedented rate, and we've got to become aware, much more aware than we are, of our place within the globe rather than the British Isles. The change is unprecedented, and we have to plan for a way forward. As you say, Scotland's a wealthy country. I don't see the point that the previous speakers were making. That I was picking up on this, that under independence, everybody's going to go to London. London has a population of, I can't remember what it is, 8.5 million, and it's growing very substantially. The cost of property down there is 3 times what it is here, and it's growing daily. So I'm afraid I would take issue with those who claim that they were based themselves in London. London's not everything. It is, though, this London-centric economic problem that we have that drives me in part. We benchmark ourselves, too, with the rest of the UK. Far better that we take that global view and start benchmarking ourselves with other economies in the world, and we'll find then where we really sit. I believe that in a smaller community, we're going to get there faster. We're going to be able to streamline what we can do. I believe that the only way forward is to have a far more collaborative society in which business, the community, the public sector, government, and the third sector, whoever, can work together, get rid of those silos, and we can do that, as is evident from the very fact that I'm sitting here today in government, which is a first for me.
This is not government, this is just the Parliament.
Okay, I take your point, Murdo. We've got the potential too, and I don't think we realise just the depth of potential we have to apply ourselves to that export-related growth that we've all looked at figures on.
Mr. McIntyre-Kim.
Well, first of all, I welcome your comments on Scotland's success. We are a wealthy nation. We're just not a wealthy society, because the wealth we create does not necessarily stay here and is not necessarily reinvested in Scotland. For quite a few years now, Scotland's economic growth has actually tailed behind the rest of the UK. Since devolution, the gifting of some powers and some more authority to Scotland, we've actually seen a change in Scotland's fortunes. And I believe that if a little power makes a small difference, then a lot of power could potentially make a big difference. Now, it's not so much what I think, but what my members think. And Business for Scotland has now 1,500 members who are all business owners, entrepreneurs and directors of businesses that operate in Scotland. And 100% of our membership is pro-independence. They have signed a declaration that says that we believe that Scotland becoming an independent country will give us the tools to create a better Scotland, one that is more confident, more international, more entrepreneurial, more successful, and more ambitious than the country we have right now. So there is a growing consensus within the SME sector of the business community that we represent that says that independence is actually more of an opportunity. The main thrust of my evidence already, or Business for Scotland's evidence already sent in, and what I'll be talking about today, is that Scotland can, because it is a wealthy nation, if we keep the money in Scotland, easily afford to be an independent nation. our economic growth has actually been held back by having to pay £64,000 million servicing the interest of the UK's debt, which if you take that £64,000 million over the last 32 years out of our accounts, Scotland would actually not be in deficit right now. In fact, even accounting for all the things that the UK paid for, nuclear weapons we probably wouldn't have had, leaving those in the accounts, we would have at least £50,000 million surplus right now. That research has been peer-reviewed by other think tanks as well. So basically, we believe that Scotland has actually been subsidising the UK, and the fact we've not been reinvesting in Scotland means that our economic growth, our opportunities for our communities, for our families and our businesses has been damaged. As a result, we are seeing more and more businesses swap to supporting independence when they have the full facts, which most do not yet.
Okay, thank you. Mr McCall.
Yeah, I suppose to begin with, I wasn't really pushing for independence. I was pushing for more powers for the Scottish Parliament, more fiscal powers, and I can't understand why anyone wouldn't want that. I know it's a business, and when I was developing my career, I wanted to be in charge of a profit centre, not a cost centre. You're more in control of your own destiny. And I feel that we don't have the fiscal powers to make the best of economic growth in Scotland, and I think we are way behind in economic growth in achieving the potential we could. And also, you know, we've got too high a level of joblessness. We need to create more jobs, create more private businesses, and to do that, we need to attract private businesses here. Those attracting private businesses here is what will create the wealth to allow us to fund the progress, the social progress that we all want. And we don't have the powers to attract businesses up here. London is fantastic. It's a huge magnet. The infrastructure there, the money that's spent on infrastructure, the economic policies that are decided by Westminster are heavily weighted towards it, probably quite rightly. But there's, if you go outside of London, it's not just a Scottish issue, it's the regions of the UK. And we have an opportunity here to get more powers for the Parliament. You know, it's been billed as SNP by the no voters. This isn't an SNP issue. This is an issue to give the Scottish Parliament more powers to decide its own destiny and to run the country in a way that suits Scotland more. The issues in Scotland are quite different from the issues that face London and the South East. And I think the Parliament needs those powers to address those issues. And the only way to do that is to get the additional powers that you need is to vote yes, because there's nothing been put forward by the no campaign. It's the status quo. And I don't think that hacks it. Another 15, the past 15 years, doing the same as we've done the past 15 years for the next 15 and thinking that you're going to get something different, I think is delusional. And why any politician in the Scottish Parliament of any political persuasion would not want to have more control over what happens in their own nation, it beats me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing us to speak here today at your meeting. For me, I firmly believe a yes vote is the best for the people of Scotland and Scotland's future. With my construction and development hat on, where 169,000 construction workers are employed, I feel if we had more full fiscal powers, we would be able to return a better deal for the construction industry. With my entrepreneurial hat on, where I closely work with companies like eSpark and Mentoring, we have 98% SMEs in Scotland, which is about 340,000. And again, with the limited powers that the Scottish Government have implemented in the likes of the Edge Fund through Scottish Enterprise, which is aspiring and letting small businesses grow, I believe firmly with full fiscal policies where we can look at such things as VAT, airport transport duty, aggregate tax, which should be devolved but isn't devolved currently. I firmly believe that the best future for Scotland is with independent powers.
Okay, thank you all very much. Can I just ask a follow-up question before I bring in the Deputy Convener? Really picking up on what Dan MacDonald and Jim McCall both said about this point about the London-centric economy, which is a point quite a number of people have made. If that's the case, though, I'm wondering why you think that the preferred model of a currency union with the rest of the UK, which will just see a continuance of that model, is the preferred option. And of course, we know that the rest of the UK has said, George Osborne, Ed Balls, Dan Alexander have said they don't support a currency union post-independence. But let's say there were a currency union, wouldn't it be the case, as Mark Carney said in a speech 3 weeks ago in Edinburgh, that would require a substantial ceding of sovereignty? Is it conceivable, for example, that if there was a currency union, the rest of the UK would be happy to allow the junior partner in that currency union to, for example, cut corporation tax in Scotland, lower the rest of the UK? Surely that's not a model that's going to give us the fiscal freedom that both of you suggest that you want. Mr MacDonald.
Well, cutting corporation tax is something that is important to me, but it's part of a national plan that includes a lot of other things, including what Jim mentioned there, infrastructure. I don't really see what the problem is about the common currency. In a hypothetical sense, there's no a threat from George Osborne that we can't have the pound is absolute nonsense, and it doesn't suit businesses in England any more than it would in Scotland. So I see it as a no-go area. There's no discussion on it, because the call for Plan B is just to mess up what Alex Salmond said. Now, I don't care what Alex Salmond says. I feel that Scotland is a better place, led by Scottish business, in that collaborative way that I've been talking about. And I can't say that the currency issue is a side issue, but it's something that we can sort out. I'm quite confident about.
But what about this point about the currency union, meaning there'd be very strict controls imposed on what Scotland can do?
Well, we can live with that, the same as we live with many other things in a period of transition. Who knows what happens in the future? If the Scottish economy thrives, as I would see it thriving, and as everyone would hope, maybe people south of the border would turn to us and look at us as an example in leading a way forward. I don't see why not.
Okay. Mr McCall?
Well, I don't see that it's a problem. I mean, the currency union and being tied to the Bank of England would still give you plenty of fiscal freedom. I don't see why it would stop you flexing tax policies. That's going beyond what the Bank of England would do. They would set interest rates. They would maybe look at borrowing levels that you couldn't go above. But it still gives you plenty of freedom to have the flexibility to design fiscal policies that would stimulate business growth and attract businesses into Scotland. So, for me, it's a non-issue.
Okay. Briefly, Mr McNamara.
Very briefly, first of all, the fact that you've asked the question, would, under a official currency union, would the rest of the UK be happy with Scotland varying the corporation tax is an interesting question, because it would also suggest that they wouldn't be very interested in having us vary corporation tax as part of a devolved settlement either. Now, a lot of tax powers are actually moving to Scotland, or we're told are moving to Scotland as part of the 2012 Scotland Act, but actually it's about 15% of the tax varying powers. Basically, there is a great deal of uncertainty as to whether there will be any more tax varying powers coming to Scotland, because the unionist parties can't agree on a actual statement on that. The question about sovereignty as well, I think what happens is if Scotland actually votes yes, then we gain 100% sovereignty. What we can then do is decide to share powers with other nations through the EU, through agreements that are mutually beneficial. And we'll always have the ability to change our mind at some point in the future. But I don't see necessarily the divergence of Scottish economy with the rest of the UK doing that in my lifetime, whereby the divergence would be so much that we would decide not to carry on with sterling. So sovereignty is 100% Scotland's, and it's our choice, our democratic choice, as to what we do with it afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Convener. It's probably a question to Mr McCall, because I think you were sort of suggesting that initially you weren't sort of going down the yes road. I'm sort of wondering what sort of convinced you to go that road, and I'm also wondering if there was any truth in any of the rumours, or maybe it was speculation within the press, that Westminster or the Better Together had approached you any time, anyone in the witnesses, to maybe try and convince you to be part of the union or remain part of the union?
Well, I think I've explained why I think yes is the only way that you're going to get more powers in the Scottish Parliament, because there's no evidence, or there's nothing being put forward to give you more powers in the no vote. And I think we need more powers to be able to stimulate growth, to create more jobs, to deal with poverty and deal with the welfare issues that we have, stimulate growth in businesses. And yes, I was asked by Better Together, I was invited down to 10 Downing Street to discuss the issues, and I did make the same statement there, that I said, if you think saying vote no and we'll do something later, then that's not going to fly. And the answer I got back was, you're right, we'll need to do something about that. But I haven't seen anything being done about it.
Okay, anyone else been...
Anyone approached by Better Together?
Been approached by Better Together?
No.
It would appear not. It would appear not. So they're going for you, Mr. McCall. I'm wondering, we spoke to the other panel, and there was quite a lot of discussion about Europe, and I was asking the question, if the UK were to leave Europe, what would that mean to their businesses? In the event of a yes vote, do you believe that Scotland will be in a much stronger place as an independent country in Europe, and if the rest of the UK leave Europe at a later date, we're going to be in a much stronger position without them? Mr. MacDonald.
Well, it's a very difficult one. I feel that very strongly that we should remain part of Europe, and that's where my thought process stops. I don't think Britain are doing the right thing in departing or suggesting that departing from Europe might be a good thing. It's more about consolidation of countries globally than it is leaving a broad economic forum such as that. I don't see a problem if Scotland stays in the UK, in Europe, and England depart. Well, it'll lead to the very difficulties that are being projected by these arguments about currency and whatever other things, cross-border things there may be, but I really don't see it as being a big issue. I think it's sidetracking the main issue, which we have to debate between now and September.
Thank you for that. Mr. McCall, you got a view on that?
On the Europe issue?
Yes. I think what David Cameron has proposed is very good, that we need to negotiate a different stance with Europe in the UK, because there's too much being decided by non-elected people in Brussels. So I think there needs to be a change there. So I'm supportive of what they're trying to do, but I'm also quite supportive of staying in Europe. I've got a number of businesses across Europe. It's a common market. We have no issues trading with each other, trading with the UK, although there's different currencies between Europe and the UK. It doesn't pose a problem for us, and I would be very supportive of staying in. I think what it does do is it gives us a second bite to the cherry if something goes wrong when it goes to a referendum in the UK and they vote out. At least we've got a chance. Even if we have to negotiate to get in, we've got a chance to get in. Although I don't think it would be as big a problem as is being portrayed in the press, this negotiating to get back in.
Dan MacDonald wants to come back in.
Very quickly.
Very briefly.
I remember 20 years ago, when I went to Brussels a lot, I bumped into Irish people everywhere. There were no Scots attached to the EU, and they were all there with a brief to get as much money out of Europe and get it back to Ireland and spend it in infrastructure. And you go to Ireland nowadays and see the quality of the infrastructure is there. I'm very, very envious that we've got nothing like it.
Yeah. Okay, Marie Macklin wants to come in.
I would basically say it's very important to us in Scotland and myself as a business that we remain in the EU. And I know in speaking to other business people, the concerns that they currently have is the risk from the UK government with an in-out potential referendum. I think, we've heard the spin, and I was actually pleased to see Bernard Ponsonby's interview with the Prime Minister, where he is now absolutely backing us, that should we become independent, he will back us in our application. I think the logic in the EU is all about enlargement, not creating barriers. And for me, the Scottish people want to remain in the EU. We're very positive about the EU. It's not in the EU's self-interest to say no to Scotland, because we're a very wealthy country, and there actually is legal framework there that before a referendum takes place, prior to Scotland's independence, we can actually become a member thereafter. So I think from a business person's point of view, a lot of SMEs are concerned about the constant spin on currency and the EU. I think it's about time we actually start listening to what's in the book. I mean, this book here is an open book for the people of Scotland to review. It's not on tablets of stone, it's for the business community to sit and actually discuss it, and the small SMEs to discuss it. So I'm 100% behind that we should remain in the EU.
Briefly, Mr McIntyre.
Very quickly, we've surveyed our members, and 99% of our members wish to remain within the EU. So businesses overall are very keen to stay in the EU. There's a commitment from the Conservative Party to, if they win the next election, which many commentators are saying looks more likely, that there will be an in-out of the EU, yet some people may disagree with that, I'll accept, that there will be an in-out of the EU referendum. Now, in Scotland, there is a majority for staying. I've seen polls that show that in the rest of the UK, where we're massively outnumbered, there's a majority for leaving. I think that there are no guarantees with a no vote of staying in the EU. I think everyone must accept that. So there's a great deal of uncertainty about Scotland's continued EU membership if we actually vote no. The other thing is, I don't necessarily think we'll be outside and have to reapply. Having looked at this, I think we'd have to have a referendum in order to leave. There are varying opinions on this, but what I would actually say is that the UK government has the ability to ask for clarification. Scotland does not, because it's not a member. So if the UK government wants to clear up certain issues, as it has said it does on currency, then let's also have the UK government ask for an official ruling on Scotland's status, so that the Scottish people can go to the referendum with a clear answer.
Thank you, Convener. We heard from the previous business panel about the uncertainty that the referendum is causing for their businesses and the impact on investment and jobs. As business people yourself, is this something that concerns you, this uncertainty?
I don't see it. I don't see the whole of Scottish business, but my life has been connected to commercial property development, which is our offices, retail and industrial property. And there's a nervousness, of course, among people who get up in the morning, put their kids to school and then go and get or have to get planes to London, where they're based.
Why is there a nervousness, Mr MacDonald?
Because they don't want change. Simple as that. They don't want their lives to change, and they're not interested in what they're doing here as much as what they can generate in bonuses and fees from a London base.
So their view is that business is better as it is in the union?
Pardon?
Their view is that the current constitutional settlement is better for business?
They don't really have a view. They just have a view that they don't want change. That apart, we saw a report at the end of 2012 which said that independence, the debate on independence was a great problem because it was a very prominent agency who are London-based but represented here, said that it was undermining confidence and their figures were down. This year, they're about to announce they've had a record year. that same company have had a record year. They've no worries about independence, or at least they're not talking about them. So I've got to interpret that as the independence issue being used as an excuse because their figures had dropped. Now, there's issues like that out there. Otherwise, I meet these guys day to day in the pub and the club and for lunch, and I do not see, from my heart, I do not see a great deal of concern about it. When they go to London, they've got a different agenda.
I mean, the previous panelist, Mr Kilgour, cited the referendum as the reason for delaying 2 investments.
Well,
I mean, is that an excuse he's making?
It could be. It could be. I'm not sure. That does happen. I've seen that happen before. I don't know what he's talking about there. I don't know what the investments are. So I'm not here to suggest that that's the case. But it's a bit more complicated than just the simple issue that those gentlemen talked about. In the same way as relocating to London is a very complicated matter because the costs are enormous, and I don't really know where they're going to go because the London market's exploding anyway.
I'd be interested in a couple of the other panellists on that.
I'm quite happy to answer. I mean, I think from my point of view, with the 3 hats on and being in construction development and working with entrepreneurs and board member at Ayrshire, the New Ayrshire College, I would like to answer it in that capacity, but I think it's worth noting this morning that actually New Start businesses in Scotland has been announced today at 30,263, which is up from 2010 from 20,700. So there's an air of confidence there in the SME market. But from an enterprise and entrepreneur's point of view, what people are looking for in growth, and when I meet people, women in the Ayrshire Association of Businesswomen or Scottish Businesswomen, these are the people that are driving the economy, and I don't see any fear there other than keeping driving and entering competitions like the Edge Fund through the Scottish Government to drive forward their businesses. I think as well, you know, there have been issues with the funding for lending scheme, as the Federation of Master Builders has said. You know, again, the uncertainty there is what would happen if we remain in the UK regarding taxation, VAT issues. We would have the chance here with independence to actually look at the full fiscal policies to help SMEs. So I don't see fear from an SME's point of view. I think from construction and development point of view, I think if you go along the M8 just now and you actually look up to St Vincent Street, you'll see there's cranes. And where there's cranes, there's actually investment. And where there's investment, there's money and there's jobs. And you've got a new HQ for the Scottish Power. And across the road, you've got a huge new private sector development currently being built by a national company. And I think I want to leave it with Ayrshire College and the students. The business students there and the social science students have took the bull by the horns and had their own indie ref debate. And this is the future, the young people, the people who will drive Scotland's economy. And at the start of that debate, they said that 50% wanted to remain in the UK, 33% saw the best opportunity was independent Scotland, and 17% were undecided. At the end of the debate, it was 46% yes, 43% no, and 11% undecided. These are the young folk with "I, you can" attitude that can change Scotland based on a prosperous nation. These are the brickies, the bakers, the child cares, the engineers, the accountants that have every confidence in an independent nation.
I have the details of a poll from Scotland on Sunday from 1997, which said that 76% of businesses believe that devolution will harm the economy. I remember being told that businesses were going to leave Scotland, that all the banks would relocate. It's funny, it's the exact same companies now are saying exactly the same thing now, or people are saying the same thing about the same companies. I've heard it all before. In terms of uncertainty, as I say, I think there's as much uncertainty with a no vote as there is with a yes vote, but actually we were told that foreign direct investment would actually slow down just as a result of holding the referendum. Well, actually people have been signing 25, 30-year leases on property, and actually foreign direct investment, the last Ernst & Young survey, we had a record year of numbers of projects, etc. So there's actually very little evidence of this. And the same businesses that you might think are a bit unsure, that Dan said don't want change for their own sake, not for the nation's sake, but for their own sake, those same businesses will complain if there was more powers suggested, because they just don't want change. So I don't think that there's any real worry here, because the businesses didn't leave after devolution, and I don't think they're going to leave after independence.
Okay. I'll bring Jenny Manor back in one question. I'll just say we are short on time this morning. We have to sharpen up quite a bit, I'm afraid, on some of the responses, because we're not going to get through this. And I know Jim McCall's got a plane to catch this morning. Mr. McCall.
Well, it's this afternoon, so
I think you need to leave this morning, don't you?
You know, I've got, I think it's 42 investors, most of which are from overseas, two-thirds from the US, the rest from Europe, and I think I've got 2 in Scotland. I'm seeing no nervousness with them at all. In fact, we were twice oversubscribed in our last fund, which was just recently, and we've got huge.
Is there experience?
That's businesses that want to invest
lack of
into
investment
Scotland.
Doesn't concern you, Mr. McCall?
No.
Because we've heard from the panel earlier that it's a real concern and that investment has been delayed. As a businessman in Scotland, does that not concern you for our economy?
No, I'm talking about, people are talking about, Robert Kilgore, for example, he's talking about a small project that he's delaying. He's also Robert...
He said 2 major projects he delayed.
Robert did say that they're going ahead. He's holding off on them just now.
But it could
he's
be
the one that
years,
could put it forward.
It will have an impact on investment and jobs. Does that not concern you about our economy?
What I'm concerned about the economy, that's why I want to vote. I want the vote to be yes, to get more powers, because people that I talk to, the investors I talk to, are keen to see what happens here, but they're not concerned about the outcome because they're still going to invest. It's not going to turn them off. And these are people that are going to invest large sums, much larger than what Robert was talking about.
Okay.
It's very hard to raise money, isn't it, Jim, for any project just now, and it's easy to find excuses not to do them or delay them. It's symptomatic of where the economy is.
Yeah, I find that an interesting answer, Mr MacDonald, because the SNP members are always telling us that the economy is improving and that we have record investment. So for you to say that that's an excuse... Yes, well, that's the evidence. Okay, my second question is, you were all...
Right, I really think
That'll be very short, convener.
Well, okay, if we get very short answers, but come on.
Okay, you were all very pro-membership of the European Union as an independent Scotland. I think there is recognition that when we apply or go through the process of going into the European Union as an independent country, we will not get the same conditions. It's the reality of every political negotiation, as I'm sure you know, you negotiate all the time. So can the panel tell me which of the 3 opt out of the euro, the rebate and Schengen that they would be prepared to forfeit for a Scottish independent country to enter the European Union?
That's a false assumption, I'm afraid. It's entirely possible that we can end up with more opt-outs. Denmark is a small nation of a similar size. It has 5 opt-outs. The UK has 3.
But it's a member of the European Union. We would be an applicant.
So is Scotland, and there is absolutely no mechanism other than us having a referendum and agreeing to leave that would actually technically take it out. I've said before, the UK Parliament should ask for a clarification on this. So you're asking us a negative question. The answer is that Scotland has a great deal of negotiating power in terms of renegotiating our continued membership. The sea that we control, the oil revenues, etc. It would be ridiculous with 26% of the renewable capacity of the EU to say that we don't have a strong hand
so
in renegotiating. So you're saying
we'll get everything that we want in that negotiating process?
No, you're saying that we definitely wouldn't. I'm saying that there's a possibility we'll actually get more.
Okay, we get the point. Right. Okay. Somebody else want to pick that question up? Mr McCall?
Well, I agree. I mean, I think it's that's kind of like it's a question that it's not a question. It's trying to make a point that these are issues. They're not issues. They're up for negotiation. I think that we will be able to go in. And there's one thing that I object to that's bandied about a lot on the No campaign. We're withdrawing from the UK. We're not part of the UK. We're not British anymore. We will be part of the UK because it's the United Kingdom, which is the union of the crowns. The Queen will still be the head. We're separating the parliaments. We had a United Kingdom 103 years before we had a United Parliament. So, this is all sort of scaremongering rhetoric that's thrown about coming out of the UK. We're not coming out of the UK. McCall. And it's very unique. We're in a very unique position compared to anybody else in Europe because we will remain with the same head of state. after we devolve the Parliament.
Right. Okay, we need to move on because otherwise we're going to run out of time. Alison Johnson.
Thank you, Convener. Ms Macklin, in your submission you note that a constructive case has been made for the reduction of VAT on repairs, a case that's been repeatedly ignored by Westminster Government, and it's one that I've been contacted on by the construction industry, by architects. It's certainly, there's no incentive at the moment for repair and maintenance, and I think that's a great shame. We have a lot of hard-to-treat properties in Scotland when it comes to insulation and so on. But a member of the earlier panel suggested that his approach would simply be to continue lobbying the Westminster Government on the issues that were important to him. But Mr McCall noted that you can't keep doing the same thing and expect to achieve a different outcome. So is it simply the case that it's impossible for Scottish businesses to optimise conditions for business without independence?
As I said earlier, if you read Scotland's Future Book, this is an open book for the people of Scotland from all different sectors to put their opinion across on what would be best for Scotland regarding the fiscal powers that Scotland have, regarding all forms of taxation. The VAT is it's very close to my heart because being a regeneration company specialist of listed buildings, we've seen in October 2012 that relief, zero relief withdrawn and put back to standard rate. Now that equates to 350,000 properties in the UK being affected on regeneration in town centres and city centres. It affects the construction industry, where we could be accelerating the process of repairs and renewals in buildings and creating more jobs in the construction industry. People have pulled back. The actual Federation of Small Builders, in their survey, they actually have said that they are looking, 43% of them are looking to put prices up. They are looking at the fact that they've been lobbying for a VAT reduction to 5% from 20%. Now, the revenue actually gained £85 million from that listed building change, which to me is just not acceptable. And I think what the appalling thing was, the Telegraph actually printed that when the Chancellor put that tax in place, he was aiming at the work in private homes with historic value, where millionaires were installing swimming pools. Well, I'm sorry, there ain't many swimming pools in Kilmarnock or in Ayr. That tax is a direct tax in the construction industry and homeowners and small business owners. And I think if you look at the Irish model, I mean, they have basically come up with scenarios to help the construction industry. And I have put it in my paper, the Living City Initiative, which on all buildings, they're giving 7 to 10-year capital allowances, tax allowances back to people who do repairs, which will actually in turn benefit the construction industry. And they're actually saying they'll hopefully gain 5,500 jobs. With independence and our own tax raising powers, we can look at driving that economy and gaining more income from the Treasury and getting people back to work, women back to work, and through childcare provisions. So I firmly believe that's why I'm so passionate about a yes vote. For
thanks. That was a very helpful response. I'd appreciate hearing similar examples from our other witnesses, Convener.
If they would be very brief about it, that would be helpful. If they have anything you want to add, if not, we can easily move on.
Very quick example, 21 out of 28 EU nations have actually reduced the VAT rate on hotels to boost tourism, something that Business for Scotland would support as well. Ireland reduced with a 21.5% standard VAT rate. They charged 9% on restaurants, hotels and tourist attractions. The idea is that not all tax reductions actually reduce the overall tax take, because what happens is that if you reduced air passage duty and you reduced hotel tax, etc., we get more people coming to Scotland and they'd spend more money in Scotland, and the overall tax take would go up. So the simple idea of if you raise taxes you get more money, well, you don't. If you raise there are certain thresholds that if you go above, people stop buying that product or that's related to it. So I think there's a very strong example here of where air passenger duty, corporation tax, VAT, they've not been devolved to Scotland. I personally don't believe they will be devolved to Scotland in the event of a no vote, because if you did, that would give Scotland an economic advantage over the rest of the UK, and London does not want that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Right, okay, I'll bring in Christian Allard.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you for coming this morning. Just leaning on this and talking about a successful Scotland, because we are a successful and rich nation, and we expect with a yes vote to be a more successful nation, a prosperous nation. But we heard from the last panel that there will be some concern about skill shortages, and particularly I'm a member from the North East, and we have skill shortages there. So I've seen that in the white paper. There is a lot of debate, and we heard from Ms. McLean about it, about childcare, which we could help participation of women into the workforce. So what other things would you see that we could help boost the working age population? Particularly, we heard from Mr. Kilgour, who said earlier that he would like to see immigration policies to be devolved. Do you think we can have a different policy on this? Mr. McIntyre?
I think the point about a collaborative society is important, because there's a lack of engineers in the North East because we didn't see forward properly. But if we can, within a national plan, become truly collaborative and get away from the voices of industry, the CBI and the likes, and have, like they have in Germany, and people working within a collaborative environment, then there'll be fewer job gaps in various industries if it's planned properly. That doesn't answer the whole question, though.
I think from my point of view, with an enterprise hat on, the way you create jobs is by creating entrepreneurs, and there's plenty of entrepreneurs out there. I mean, there's 340,000 small businesses that employ 1.1 million people in this country. But again, going back to the fiscal powers that we have, I would look at the Irish model. In the budget in 2014, they have come up with some fantastic ideas to encourage enterprise and create jobs. And for a couple of examples, if you want me to explain some of them to you. I mean, you have got, for example, in the Irish budget, the SYOB scheme, and that was purposely to encourage unemployed people to start up their own businesses with giving them tax breaks. We have got, at UK government level, certain offerings, so to speak, through EIS relief, etc. But these are aimed at people with money. People that have got money in the back pocket to invest in businesses. What we need to look at is the growth of small businesses. In Ireland, we've got the home renovation scheme, which is hitting, it's getting 2 turns a year. The home renovation scheme is, again, for people who want to work from home, getting capital allowances and tax breaks for a 2-year period to reinvest that money back into home repairs, which in turn helps the construction industry. And one that was really important, I felt, was the seed capital scheme. And that was people who had been made unemployed or had chose to move on under pay-as-you-earn, they paid tax. If they actually start up their own business, they get 6 years exemption from tax and get refunds back. That's how you grow an economy and create jobs. And for me, that's what I believe independence could bring, because the UK government have had the opportunities to give us varied schemes, and I can refer you back to what Federation Small Builders are saying. These schemes aren't working. The funding for lending ain't working. There's bias towards the construction industry. So independence would, again, let us bring all this together and roll out new models.
Hundreds of thousands of people have left Scotland as economic immigrants to the rest of the UK. My own family, I was brought up in the northeast of England. I'm the only person that's actually come back from my family, I think. I have cousins all over the world who've moved to Australia, New Zealand, etc. I actually think that with the powers of independence, we can start growing our country at the same rate as just even the average rate of small independent European countries would have meant that our country would be 30% larger, sorry, our economy would be 30% larger than it is today over the last since 1963. So basically, I think the migration to Scotland, people coming to live in Scotland, will actually not necessarily be immigrants from all over the world. I think the vast majority will be people coming back from England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Ireland, where we already have open borders. I think that would be where the majority of the immigration would come from. But can I just quickly point out that the University College London has done some work on this and found out that immigrants from within the European Economic Area bring a 45% relative surplus. They earn more, they're more highly qualified, etc. That can allow us to grow our businesses, and that means we can create more employment as well. So basically, as Scotland grows, we'll need more people, and as more people come and they start having families here, it will change the demographics, and it will really paint a much better picture for our economy if we can actually get immigration right.
Just very quickly on the looking at welfare, which is not a devolved issue. I've been involved chairing a group in Glasgow in Welfare to Work. And what happens is an initiative comes out from the Westminster Government, which is a good initiative to help people, but you have to give the support to help build the skills in the people. You have to be able to bid to manage this contract, and to be able to bid, you have to be able to deliver it nationally. So you get someone who's based down south bids for it, because no one in Scotland delivers it nationally. They can't deliver it in Scotland, so they subcontract it to someone in Scotland. They have to take their fees off that money to cover their costs in managing it. It then gets devolved to someone in Scotland who can't deliver it in all the areas, who again subcontracts it. At the end of the day, 40% of the money that was assigned to that to develop skills doesn't get to the people it needs to get to. So this is a clear issue where, you know, devolving welfare as one of the topics would be a positive thing. And just one other issue, that skills development is separate from Job Centre Plus. Yeah. We have duplicate facilities in most towns where we're not allowed to share data. You know, you can't go and find out the people who need the help from Job Centre Plus. You have to then spend more money through skills development, which is not going in to the end development of the skills. It's nuts the way it's set up, and we need to streamline that so that it's all delivered end to end.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allard. We've got 4 members left who want to ask questions, and we've got about 15 minutes left, so we'll need to be quite sharp, if we can, on the responses. Marco Biaggi.
Just ask one question then, and that is the same question I asked before to the last panel. Do you believe that successive UK governments have done enough to enhance gender participation, female participation in particular, in business, both at the start-up level and at higher echelons?
No, they haven't. We need to do more. Next. That's my answer.
The majority of for Scotland city leaders are actually female. That's the only thing I'll just add in there, but I agree, no, they haven't.
Okay. Marie Macklin.
I would say no, they haven't. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a member of Ayrshire Business Association, the Scottish Business Women Association, and this topic has been discussed for Davos, for Dundee to Davos, and the UK government's position is on they don't believe in quotas. European Union recently have set a 40% quota for 2020. There has been various to and fro at a national level. We now see that Angela Merkel has set a 30% quota for 2016, and we even have Christian Lagarde now believing in quotas, and the Deputy First Minister here obviously has been recently stating about the quota issue. I think from a women's perspective, women want job and merit. What we need to do is we need to get women into work. So I know when I speak to women at Ayrshire Business, they welcome the government's position on childcare provisions and an increase in that. Going forward, you know, I think it's interesting that in the FTSE 100, there only is 100, out of the 100 companies, there's only 17.3% employ women. And there has been a statute put out that you have to put in your accounts who's employed, etc., and that should be 25%. So for me, I think we just have to face reality, and the fact is that, yeah, I think a quota is required. And maybe during that banking crisis, if we had more Lehman sisters than Lehman brothers, we wouldn't have actually faced the situation that we were in.
I did say one question, but do you believe that level of improvement, both childcare and at board level, will be delivered by any UK government?
Hasn't been delivered to date, has it? So, I mean, I think looking forward, I can only refer back to what's in the book and what I hear out there in the streets from the women of Scotland. They welcome the 600 hours for childcare provision. They welcome the increase up to, is it 1,500 hours, 1,400 hours, when we get independence in the first Parliament.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No, Jeff, I didn't think that. I think Mary Mac has covered that very well. Right. Margaret McDougall.
Thank you and good morning, panel. I'm going to go back to the currency issue where Jim McCall mentioned earlier that he felt that businesses would deal with whatever currency that is decided upon. I mean, we've heard that there won't be a currency union. And if you were just to go along with that, and, you know, so the options are, you know, sterlingisation or another currency altogether. You said that you would be happy and businesses would work with whatever they were given. Well, and that would...
Well, for a start, I don't think there's going to be an issue about having the pound, so I don't think it's an issue. But in the broader sense, we deal with a number of currencies in our businesses. You know, we deal between the UK just now and Europe with pounds, sterling, and euros. We have absolutely no trouble with it. I think the issue is being blown out of all proportion. We have to deal with that across our businesses. You know, different currencies.
So do you not see that there would be additional transactional costs, for example, for businesses if there was a different currency in Scotland?
Well, you don't know. There doesn't. If you're a business that is dealing out with the UK and you've got businesses out with it, quite often you don't have. You can negate currency costs because you can balance it up between the different businesses. So there's not necessarily currency costs in doing something like that. If you're constantly dealing in the currency, then you can have an account with that currency, and you don't need to take costs of it. You can have in your bank account a euro account, a dollar account, and a sterling account. You don't need to incur costs changing it back and forward all the time.
Right. Does anyone else have a response to that?
I don't think it's an issue. I believe we'll end up with common currency if we see a yes vote. But following on from what Jim's just said, Scottish businesses are going to have to deal with many currencies and changes in currencies more and more and more as we spread our wings globally, which we have to do to survive. I don't know how many countries you're in now, Jim, but I know, for instance, the Wood Group are in 80 different countries, and the Weir Group are in 50. I may have that the wrong way around. So dealing with a currency issue is not a problem, but we don't have that problem anyway because we'll have a common currency, I reckon.
I always have three in my pocket. You know, there's dollars. Not an issue.
So you'd have no issues with the Bank of England setting the interest rates?
No. I think that's a financial discipline, a fiscal discipline that we would want to stick with anyway. I think we're very well aligned with the rest of the UK in terms of productivity and our economy. So I don't think there would be a problem with the interest rates being set by the Bank of England.
Can I just add in there that the UK, as it is a common market, if you like, is an optimum currency area. England on its own might not be. Scotland on its own might not be. It makes sense for us to share a currency, just as it makes sense for Belgium and Luxembourg to share a currency, for France and Germany to share a currency. Currency unions are not inherently difficult unless you allow the wrong countries in. And people talk about Greece quite a lot. It's not because of the use of the euro, it's because of consistent failures in the management of Greece's finances, Chancellor after Chancellor. So basically, we've seen Deutsche Bank actually say that the UK is an optimum currency area. Citibank has agreed with that. Businesses north and south of the border want it. The people north and south of the border want it. So basically, we have a situation where it makes sense for everyone. You've also got to ask the question that if it increases the possibility that Scotland would not take on a fair share of the UK's debt, on the balance of that, the Vienna Convention suggests it's the principle of international law that guides these negotiations. You take on a fair share of debt and a fair share of assets. If the assets are not given, then it's a principle that you would not take on the debt as well. Yes. Scotland's economy is about 10% of the UK. If we didn't take on the debt, then you'd see a 20% rise in the debt to GDP ratio of the UK. That would potentially damage the UK's AAA rating. And it's not just business transaction costs. I think there'd be a serious worry about English homeowners not having the mortgage rates that they currently have as well. So they could be the ones that would pay the folly of not agreeing to maintain the world's most successful currency union.
Okay, need to move on because we're very short on time. Chick Brody.
Just following on from that, the point made by the convener at the beginning, we're always in great danger of conflating currency union and monetary union, which are not the same thing. I wonder if I may ask Gordon McIntyre Kemp, sorry, yes. Good afternoon, good morning, lady and gentlemen. UK has a trade deficit of about 35 billion. Scotland has a trade surplus of 6.3 billion. Our fiscal deficit is 2.3% of GDP. The UK is 6% of GDP. The capital account that the UK has is 446 billion. It is a debt of 1.347 billion, going up to 1.74 billion. If, just, you bear with me, just assume we don't have a currency union, what do you think would happen to sterling and the rest of the UK on the basis of that figures? Remembering that the Chancellor himself last week in Hong Kong said the UK needs to have a much more balanced economy and needs to export a lot more. I wonder if you can comment on that.
The UK's economy has gone through a process of deindustrialisation. It's not just Scotland and the west coast of Scotland in particular, I guess, that's been damaged by that, but the rural areas as well, but also major parts of the rest of the UK. As I said, I was brought up in the northeast of England as well, and I think that that policy was radically different to the one followed by Germany, who invested in medium-sized manufacturing firms, SMEs, etc. And as a direct result, they've had a radically different outcome. I think it's worked far better for them. In terms of the balance of payments, there's, I thought it was very interesting to hear David Cameron from the Olympic Stadium actually state in his speech that whisky alone contributes £120 per second to the UK balance of payments. And I think that there's an admission there that Scotland does export a significant amount as well. I actually think it's a lot more than 120. I think he actually used figures from last year as opposed to the most recent ones, which is about 150, I think. But I can supply details on that and written evidence afterwards. But Scotland's exports are worth nearly 100 billion in 2012 alone. You know, whisky, food and drink, these sort of things are very important to that. The other thing is that the UK actually exports more to Scotland than Scotland export in percentage terms. So it actually generates about £5,000 million worth of goods and services cross the border from the rest of the UK to Scotland. If we were to put barriers to that trade, then that would be the second largest and actually the most important export market for the rest of the UK could be damaged, and hundreds of thousands of jobs in England alone are dependent on that trade. That's why I believe there won't be any barriers to trade, while we'll maintain open borders, and also why we should maintain the currency union as well, because it makes sense. It's in everyone's benefit.
Absolutely. One other question. For Jim, Mr McCall and
I've got nothing intelligent to add to that.
No. Moving on to the next question. One of the comments made by the Sheffield Policy Exchange Research said that because of the weakness of the UK economy, and it is weak, potential benefits of the UK economy have been squandered in favour of boosting financial services concentrated in London. After some research that I had done, we find that Scotland has 1/4 of the population of London and the South East, yet spending on construction is, public and private sector, is 1/7. I mean, how the impact on Scottish raw material for building must be quite substantial. I mean, how do we suggest we address that.
I didn't quite get the...
What I'm saying is the construction. You mean one of the points you made by a UK government policy which fails to recognise the importance of the construction industry and real upfront public investment. Well, let me put the question. Do you agree that the programme that we've engendered in terms of capital investment, particularly in construction, has created a situation where Scotland is now, next to London, a very impressive growth economy?
I could just agree with you, yes. I've got nothing...
That's all I wanted.
Right.
Marie.
Obviously, construction close to my heart. I think from a construction point of view, I would take it back from the major construction companies to the small SMEs. And I see and speak to a lot of them, especially some of the contractors that have done work for us. I mean, I think from a construction point of view, we need to take a serious look at the items like aggregate levy. The aggregate levy was meant to be devolved here, but due to EU court case just now, it's not. I mean, that was a levy that's affecting the construction industry that was meant to be an environmental tax levy. But under the policy of the UK government, they actually changed how that levy would work. There was funds to go into a social sustainability fund, and due to the austerity measures, that was cancelled. So we now, again, have a basic tax. It's a tax in the construction industry, which creates jobs. So, again, for construction, 169,000 employees in Scotland, we would like to see issues of VAT being tackled that I've explained earlier with a VAT reduction. Federation of Small Builders has voiced their opinion to that to the UK government, but nobody seems to be listening.
All right, we need to move on.
Thank you, Convener. It was a question for Mr MacDonald, because I was quite intrigued by, in his written submission, the suggestion that there could be some efficiency savings made from relocation of government departments, if you like, that we're currently paying for in Westminster, being relocated to property in Scotland after independence, where property values, rentals and so on are much lower. And could you just, am I on the right track? Did I interpret what you were saying correctly?
Yes. Just in case I give the wrong impression, I think we should be strengthening our conduit with London, by the way. So it's not a reflection on rejecting London. But it was very, very difficult. I got some people to look into this, and it was very, very difficult to get the statistics. And what I've been saying is that the amount of space that's used by UK government, and it's in a report which eventually we found called The State of the Estate in 2012, printed by Her Majesty's Government in May 2013, tells us that 99 million square feet is occupied. 99 million square feet of space is occupied by government. And it made me think, well, what do we actually pay for and what do we own there? So if you take Scotland's population as 8.4% of that, it comes back to 4.3 million square feet in the calculation that we've made, which you can challenge because it's a rough calculation, because we've already got some government here. It means that we need that amount of space under full fiscal autonomy. The cost then you look at, and in a nutshell, the cost of that in Scotland would be, it's worked out on a very, very rough, but we're not pushing the figures out. We're only putting £20 a square foot on it. It's 3 times, it's a third of what it costs in London. So the point I was making was, one, there's a huge stimulus to the economy and the construction industry in particular. It's not a reason to go for independence, but there's a huge benefit in generating construction work, property work, jobs, and what comes alongside of that, which is housing and services and other things. And, it struck me that some people haven't really thought about that in much depth.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. I've got one last question, if I can, for Mr McCall, before you have to fly off. You sounded a bit like a reluctant yes voter, because you were talking about how you started off with your preferred model being further devolution. If there was a substantial package of further devolution offered by the unionist parties, might you be tempted to vote for that instead of independence?
Well, you know, obviously I'd look at what I'm interested in is the fiscal powers. You know, we heard Rupert Soames talking about if you reduce the corporation tax rate, you have to put up something else. That's nonsense. I mean, the Irish corporation tax rate is 12.5%, and they take 40% more in absolute terms in corporation tax in Ireland today than we do here. So, you know, he obviously didn't do the Economics 101 course at university. And it's the same with the examples that Marie gave, where, you know, if you reduce some taxes, you stimulate the economy and you actually take more tax in. So I would want to be able to vary those, you know, have those powers. And I would need to see what was on offer. And obviously, you know, if it's on offer, then fine.
Okay.
I would consider.
Okay, well, our next panel is here to discuss that very issue. So, yeah. In the meantime, can I say thank you very much to all of you for coming along. It's been very helpful. I'm sorry we were so rushed, but we've got a lot to get through in this inquiry, and at this point we'll have a short suspension. Thank you. Right, if we can reconvene, I'd like to welcome our third panel this morning. We're joined by Ben Thompson, who's Chairman of Inverleith LLP, Dr. Margaret Ann Craig, who's the Chief Executive of Clyde Biosciences Limited, Hugh Andrew, who's the Managing Director of Berlin Limited, and Anne-Marie Morrison, Founder and Managing Director of Labels for Kids. Welcome to you all. Now, just to remind colleagues, we've had two panels this morning. The first panel were people who were anti-independence, and the second panel were people who were pro-independence. And you're here either because you have no particular view on the matter, or you're undecided, or because you favour perhaps a middle way with further devolution. So we want to explore some of that. And I can remind colleagues once again that we have a large panel, so they would keep their questions short and focused and address them preferably to an individual panel member. And then if you want to come in and answer a question directed to somebody else, if you just catch my eye, I'll bring you in as time allows. Can I maybe just start off and ask you all, what is your general view of the independence debate in relation to business and your business in particular? And what is going to decide this for you, whether it's a yes or a no, or perhaps looking, as I know Ben Thompson does, for more powers? What is the key thing you need to see to help you make up your mind? I'll maybe start with Ben Thompson and just work along.
Yes, and today I'm wearing my hats of Inverleith Capital, but also Reform Scotland, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. And Reform Scotland is a business think tank, so we're representing the views of many businessmen and women who are members of it. In principle, we think that devolution has worked, and the Holyrood Parliament is a good thing, and has given us greater access to more political representation locally, and that's to be applauded. What we have generally felt is that there are two areas in particular that would help devolution further to provide a better environment for business in Scotland, which are further fiscal powers, so that, by and large, Scotland is much more responsible for raising the money that it spends. And secondly, that in alleviating poverty, aspects of welfare should be handled at a Holyrood and local government level, whereas most of them at the moment are centralised. So I think my views and the views of Reform Scotland are well known. We set out 5 years ago the principle of Devo Plus, which looks at further devolved fiscal and welfare powers. We are seeing, I think, both unionist parties and independence parties having moved more towards the middle ground, which we would welcome. And as that continues, actually, we see that as healthy and having influenced the debate.
Okay, thank you very much. Margaret Ann Craig.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. So I am CEO of Clyde Biosciences, which is a spin-out from the University of Glasgow. I'm a cardiac physiologist, and now what we have here is a company which is just over 1 year old, and we have fantastic opportunity. We have world-leading technology, all aimed at drug discovery, in a market of cardiac toxicity where the FDA regulations are about to change, and I've positioned this company and got the technology to put this as a leader in its field. And so the market of several £100 million is a completely open market for us, and we're looking in a very strong position for that. So right now, as we prepare to think about scaling up this company in Scotland, what we have to think about is the investment. Will the investment still come to this company in order to have it remain here and grow? Will the pharmaceutical companies and other companies have confidence in us to deliver these technologies? I'm also concerned about the Research Funding Council budgets, which fund the technology and the technology pipeline to keep this company ahead in its field. Will that remain? Because there are some doubts about that, and I do hear research councils saying they're unsure of how they will fund Scotland in the future. This also has serious concerns for my academic co-founders and also universities in general, is that when it is very difficult to remain and to sustain an academic career in science, will this lack of, or possibility of lack of research funding council money have an impact on the amount of scientists and graduates that we have, particularly when we do need many engineers and new scientists for the future. I also, as the Royal Academy of Engineering UK Entrepreneur of the Year for 2012, I look at the support that has come from places like the Royal Academy of Engineering. I'm a fellow of the ERA Foundation. I look at the BBSRC, who funded me for 1 year as an enterprise fellow, and these have all had a serious impact, a real support for me in taking this company and getting it to the stage it's at. What will happen to that for the future? So right now, I'm very much sitting on the fence. We have a real opportunity here, but I am concerned about the future of sustaining this company. Is this the best place to set up this company in Scotland right now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hugh Andrew.
I run and set up Berlin Limited some 20 years ago. We turn over £2.5 million. I employ 20 people. I have a couple of businesses in London which employ a further 20 people. I should say that with Ben, I am a strong believer in a substantial further passing down of powers to the Scottish Parliament, and I believe that the core of that must come with fiscal powers. I think that many of the issues that nationalists raise today actually would be answered by such a substantial and more federal United Kingdom. The concerns I have at the moment about the great single leap into the dark that is proposed is that there are so many unknowns. We had recently a letter which came to Struan Stevenson about the European Commission's attitudes to the VAT derogations that apply in the United Kingdom and what the situation would be in Scotland. The letter from the Commissioner was absolutely clear that should Scotland apply to be a new member of the European Union, then those derogations would go. I run a small publishing company, and I would therefore have a minimum 5% VAT put on books which would not apply south of the border. That is potentially fatal for me, and it's potentially fatal for the staff to whom I am responsible. Now, I'm not saying that this is not a resolvable issue, but it's an issue that has to be considered and dealt with. There are other issues that matter for me because we operate in a single cultural market in the book world, and to place an artificial barrier to that market seems to me problematic. I would like to see if you were asking what would swing me the other way, it would see an attitude in the Scottish Parliament which was very much concerned to foster micro-businesses and entrepreneurship within Scotland and counteract the huge drag that exists in London, in my industry, as in so many others.
Okay, thank you. Anne-Marie Morrison.
Hi, my name's Anne-Marie Morrison. It's nice to be here as well to meet you all. I've been running an e-commerce business for 9 years now. I was appointed on the UK government task force to join ASOS and Wiggle, Marks and Spencer's, John Lewis and some of the larger companies to advise the UK government on advancing e-commerce into Europe, basically, out of the blue. So that was quite interesting to see bigger businesses are having the same issues that I'm having. As a small business based in Scotland, I love working in Scotland. I think it's a great place to work. It's great for SMEs at the moment. My issues, I suppose, come more from the complexity and the confusion about it at the moment. At the moment, I don't have any barriers to trading in the UK. I have a lot of barriers trying to trade into Europe with the addition of, it was interesting to listen to the last panel, the addition of things like currency, for example, for me, makes a big issue because I can't set up company bank accounts in each different currency and then just not, sort of ride the wave of the currency fluctuations. For small businesses, that's quite expensive to do. So we haven't got separate bank accounts for each different currency, and that's an issue for me. If we have a different currency, obviously, am I then trading in a different currency to England than I am in Scotland? And there's obviously additional paperwork being put in place. Also, the likes of taxation, different income levels, concern me. The time involved in the additional paperwork that may arise if we have reporting to, as a SME, if we have reporting to the UK government as well as the Scottish government, then that would be a concern. Do I need additional advisors for taxation or consultants? Again, additional money, additional complexity, additional time involved. Also, most of my customers currently are in England. So for me, that's a concern that it's a perception thing. I think it may settle. Again, I'm on the fence. I think it's just an initial concern that are they going to say, Scotland, you're independent, we don't want to buy from her, we would rather buy from somebody in England. Maybe, maybe not. Postage is an issue I don't think I've heard in the last panel. For me, Royal Mail is the best, and it works the best for us. We've tried a number of things, but we have small parcels that are just C5 size. They're not big, heavy ones. We don't have shipping containers. Obviously, we're selling to individuals buying name labels. And Royal Mail has worked the best for us. And there's obviously concerns. Is it going to be privatised in one side and the other side is going to be public? And how is it going to work? Am I sending email to England, or am I just sending normal post, and what the issues that may arise from that? The other one would be franchising. We've been trying to franchise our business for a while into other countries. And my franchise consultant has advised that people are quite nervous just now. I think it's just because things are not unsettled, and the uncertainty, basically. They don't know whether to invest in Scotland. They don't know what currency it's going to be and how things are going to pan out. And it may be something that settles. But again, I'm on the fence, and I could be swayed either way, I guess. But I do have some concerns, and I think I just haven't seen the numbers to justify one way or the other at the moment.
Thank you. I mean, it's very helpful just in terms of setting the scene so we understand where all of you are coming from. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Dennis Robertson.
And good morning. I'll do my utmost best not to shake your fence because you seem to be quite comfortable sitting there at the moment. It really is. We have a white paper. The SNP government have put out a white paper, and there are certain aspirations from other people within the sort of Yes Scotland, looking at what a future Scotland can look like. Does it not concern you that you haven't had the same detail from the Better Together campaign? Start with Mr. Andrew.
Yes. I totally agree.
That's a good answer. I'm persuading you already, I see.
Well, I think it is. I think it is perfectly legitimate that the government has stated its position, and I certainly think there should be room, and indeed the quality of the debate needs a robust and literate response.
Yeah, and on that, the quality of the debate, do you think at the moment there's maybe a lot of political rhetoric and sort of in the boxing ring or something like that, and we need to get down to that quality of debate to enable people like yourselves to come to a firm decision on the 18th of September, because there isn't the option that you favour. There isn't that option that you favour in terms of the ballot paper. There's a yes/no.
Well, I would agree, though. I think we have to have, the issue of independence versus the status quo. To me, I am a federalist, and indeed I was a member of the Campbell Commission. The one way I will not get a federal United Kingdom is by voting for independence. That is my preferred option. I was interested to hear Jim McCall agree that it seemed to be largely his preferred option too. So I have to accept the ballot paper as it stands and make my judgment on that. Having said that, I think there are a number of persuasive things that the government could actually do, in which I would look at wearing a business hat. That's for others too.
Good. Thank you very much.
Right. Anybody else desperate? Ben Thompson?
I think that one of the things, there is a lot of information out there. A lot of business people say, why can't we have much more information? And actually, when you start drilling down into it, a lot of the things that they ask for are in the public domain. It's just perhaps a lack of time and effort to actually look at the information, and it's the job of perhaps government to try and put the information out in many different forms so that people can find it easy to assimilate. Because I have never had a problem, particularly in getting hold of the core information that's needed to make the decision. In terms of your information on the white paper, I think that it would be useful to know two things. One, a very good question asked of the Chancellor is that now he's set out what the terms of monetary union might or might not look like after the referendum and a no vote. He was asked whether or not he would start looking at all the other terms, and I think it would be useful to have a view on what the terms are under a no vote. I also think it would be, under a yes vote, in terms of what those would look like. I also think it would be helpful to see what the parties come forward with on what a no vote would look like, in that one has already done so under the Liberal Democrats, but both Conservatives and the Labour Party have got their commissions, and it would be nice to be able to see those commissions setting out clearly what powers would happen after a no vote, as I fully hope they will, but also to reach some sort of consensus so the public can understand, not three disparate voices, but one voice as to what that may be. And I very much hope that that will happen in the coming months.
Thank you. Margaret and Craig?
I think what has been missing has been some hard facts, and I often hear this from my colleagues, and particularly within the university, of our futures. And for me, having more hard facts available and finding them for myself is what I really need to set out to do. But it's also listening to businesses, and I talk now to businesses and to international businesses about how they feel about working with us and how they think they will work with us if we do become devolved. Will they be more reticent to do so? And I have to take that opinion and then feed that into the hard facts that I actually see there. And I still see some decisions are not made, and that will evolve over the next few months regards Research Council as to how things will go for us in the future.
Okay. Anne-Marie Morrison, do you want to add?
No, just wanted to add, I think I'm a chartered accountant, so I'd like to see the numbers. For me, I'd like to see a black and white, not even if there's much talk about debate. To me, debate is going to be arguing one way or the other. I don't want to see the arguments that, oh, we're in favour of this and we're not, we're in favour of the other. What I want to see is the black and white numbers about, okay, this is what your tax rates are going to be, this is what your currency we're going to be using, and so on. And it would be nice if that was all thrashed out beforehand and you could make a decision from that. And there's a lot of things where they're mentioning we're going to negotiate these things from the UK government once we're in power. To me, as an SME, it would be nice to know these are all thrashed out and agreed beforehand, but it's maybe in an ideal world, I guess. So.
Okay. I'll maybe stick with you, Anne-Marie Morrison, if I may. You're looking at numbers, so maybe we should sort of move towards the currency. The Fiscal Commission working group have set out what a preferred option would be for Scotland in a yes vote. From a business perspective, what would your favoured option be then, based on the information that is there?
I would prefer to keep the pounds, to be honest. I don't. Okay. For me, having an e-commerce business and seeing the effort involved in setting up an e-commerce business by each country, we have 7 countries in progress, 5 are live, another 2 to go live. It's not easy to break into another European market online, even though people try to make out that it is. It's quite difficult to do. Because of the uncertainty of the French don't want to invest maybe in the UK, and the UK doesn't maybe want to buy something. You know yourself, if you go online and you see straight away it's in US dollars, for example, you go straight to a UK site.
I'm just saying I'm conscious of the time, and I know the conditions.
Yeah, so I think the pounds would make sense.
Yeah, you would prefer the pound.
The pounds would make sense, definitely.
Okay, maybe just quickly get down the panel for very, very quick answers on this. You, Andrew?
I mean, a single mark in books, of course I prefer the pound.
Okay.
Yeah, I prefer the pound. Currency instability is just unattractive for people working with us.
If I may play devil's advocate, if we get full independence with sovereignty, I actually think there is a good argument for having an alternative currency. And I'll explain why, if I may, briefly. In that, let's suppose we do have a yes vote, then there will have to be quite a complicated treaty without political representation to set up the agreement between the two currencies. So that treaty will be a sort of Maastricht-type treaty that was set up for the euro, which will have to set out quantitative easing, interest rates, banking regulation, fiscal controls, borrowing controls. I can go on with the list, but that will take up too much time. And these treaties will then have to have rules around representation in terms of committees, rules about what happens if things go wrong. We will have a difficult set of problems, which Europe, which has got political representation, but not full political representation because of the remaining sovereignty with the nation-states within Europe, is struggling to deal with, and which is why, in Europe, they're looking for greater political integration to cope with the single currency. So, although I think it's perfectly possible after a yes vote to set up such a treaty, and that such a treaty is possible, I actually think that it's going to be fraught with difficulties. On the other hand,
possible to keep the pound.
Under a yes vote, so I do think it'll be possible to keep the pound, but I think under a treaty it is harder to operate than under political representation. I think the reason for the alternate answer is that if actually you want to go for independence, and if you want to have your own sovereignty, then there's a lot that you can do with your own currency that is quite attractive. So you can do your own quantitative easing. You can, if your economy is going at different levels to that of England, adjust it through the fact that your currency will either strengthen or weaken, which will actually help rebalance the economies between you and the rest of the world. So I think actually there is an argument to say that if we want full sovereignty and the vote is yes, there is an argument to say that we should actually go for our own currency.
Okay. Right. Jack Willie's got a brief supplementary.
Briefly on that, Mr Thompson, again, good afternoon. We can argue all day about monetary union or what have you. Do you agree it's possible to have a currency union without ceding sovereignty, as, for example, Ireland did in 1927?
It is possible, but it's not particularly satisfactory. Because let's look at the points where it breaks down and where it's been problematic. First of all, if there are differing levels within the economy, there is no pooling of anything. So the currency becomes under a greater strain. And unlike when it happened for the first, whatever it was, 50 years, when Ireland had had its independence from the UK, we didn't have the financial volatility that there is in the moment. If there's any strain between the two economies, all the hedge funds will pile in to maximise the effect and to create currency instability from which they can benefit from. So you've seen a number of examples of that happening where, let's take the ERM, for instance, where George Soros was a particularly adept at actually utilising the fact that the currencies were only joined by treaty and not joined by a properly monetary union to create an environment where they could make money. So actually, you can twin your currency. You lose out on the fact that volatility will force those to come apart. You also don't have the benefit of setting interest rates. You don't have the benefit of quantitative easing. So if the UK has already done about 40% of GDP through new quantitative easing, printing of new money in effect, that will all go to the rest of the UK if we had independence without a monetary union but had sterlingisation. So it's perfectly possible. Hong Kong does it. Panama does it. You can point to examples. But it's not. I'm trying to describe what is optimal and ask the question of what's best. It wouldn't be the system one would jump to first.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Margaret McDougall.
Thank you, Convener, and welcome, panel. I'll continue on the currency. My first question is, we've heard today that there's increases in investment, record investment, in fact, and increases in new start-ups businesses. And from the previous panel, of course, we heard that they had absolutely no problem or concerns about if there was centralisation or sterlingisation or a currency union. They would manage whatever came their way. It just seems to me that from what I've heard from this panel this morning, that you have more concerns around, because you're small businesses perhaps, you have certainly a lot more concerns around what would happen with the currency and how that would affect your business, how it would affect investment in the future, and actually just the general how you're going to manage with these changes, because obviously there's opportunities for larger businesses that you don't have around costs, and you said setting up different currency banks. So apart from the currency issue, is there anything that else that concerns you? Or is it mainly the currency issue that
I would say things like VAT, different rates for perhaps, because most of my market is mostly around London, to be honest. Most of my customers are around there. So the issues with VAT would be a big one, because we have enough work with VAT at the moment. So if we have different rates to charge different people in different parts of the country, that involves a lot of website development work as well as paperwork as well. So anything to do with taxes. For me, as a small business, I don't have currently don't have employees in England, but I know there are small businesses that I have as friends of mine through networking that have employees in England as well, and they have issues over different rates of pay, different terms and conditions for employees and things like that as well. And the postage was the other one that mentioned that affects me particularly with mail order.
Yeah, so the variances between the two countries, just, England or the rest of the UK and Scotland. Yeah.
I would widen that slightly out. VAT is obviously a huge concern for me, but as tax systems drift apart, generally, then I think there are enormous issues. For most of my customers, in fact, all of our big customers are in fact English-based companies, which then re-export to Scotland. And the hair-raising horror of trying to sort out what in fact is a Scottish supply and what is a rest of UK supply is a real issue. I'm concerned about very considerable added bureaucratic costs being added into my business from that.
I think looking at R&D tax credits for a company such as us, and will we still be able to benefit from that, and because that will have a substantial impact on our ability to develop new technologies for the future. That remains a concern for us. Is what will the level be, and will we still have real support there from that?
I chair 4 small Scottish companies in my portfolio. One is a small publishing company for children's publishers. Called Barrington Stoke, and that has employees both in England and in Scotland, and also supplies books for reluctant readers to schools. So it's very reliant on the public sector. I think that anything is possible, and has provided us a good relationship. We do a lot of business in other parts of the world. But dealing with different countries does create the problem in that you have to look at how you price the books, what the tax rate is on the books. If you have employees in other places, it adds increased burden. So it's nothing that isn't surmountable, but it just adds that extra level of bureaucracy where if you have less than 20 people in a company, it takes up more and more administration time than it needs to, and that is cost and money to a small company.
Mm-hmm. Could I just ask Margaret Ann Craig, you mentioned research earlier and your concerns around how that would work if, you currently get funding from the UK or the rest of the UK for research, and, that's going to affect your business in particular if there was a separate Scotland. Have you had any discussions around this, what would happen? Or?
This is one thing that I'm really trying to look into, is how research councils will work with us. Will they still fund Scottish universities? Mm-hmm. And I do hear that some will, but others will to an extent, but will base it on the level of perhaps revenue that they generate within Scotland from such as their shops or elsewhere. Which means that we are heavily subsidised by the UK, which will have an impact on us, and that level of funding could seriously drop, which means for my colleagues in the technology pipeline will have considerable impact. Also, if we are not part of EU, do we qualify for the EU grants that are available, which are fantastic grants for collaboration for international scientists, and that may also have an impact as can we take part in that? Can we work with that in future? Because I've just travelled to Japan, I've just travelled to Brazil to promote our technology, and the thought of working with these companies internationally, how will that impact us in the future?
Thank you. Thank you. Alison John.
Thank you, Convener. I have specific questions for Ben Thompson and for Hugh Andrew, if I may. Mr Thompson, in your submission, you point out that the financial setup of the Scottish Parliament has led to a situation where the government, regardless of political persuasion, isn't financially accountable for the decisions it takes. And as a result, it's unlikely that any government will want to make unpopular decisions. And you'll be aware as well, but when it comes to local government in the UK, we're only raising just over 12% from local government taxation, and across the EU, it's just over 40%. So, we have certainly a different approach. I mean, I think if Angela Merkel had suggested that part of her appeal to voters would have been a freeze on the council tax, she would have actually been breaching the German constitution. I just wondered if you find it surprising that a government who is such a clear advocate of financial independence has hamstrung its local authorities, and if there needs to be more of a push to explain the real benefits that come from being able to generate your own income at any level of government.
Well, I think you're nicely summarising some of the parts of our report, for which I would agree, is that what we would like to see in a perfect environment is that each level of government being broadly responsible for handling the raising of its own spend and also handling the areas that it's responsible for dealing with welfare, because that actually creates much greater responsibility at each level of government. So totally agree with you. I think that there are very few countries that are in the 90% club where 90% over 90% of revenues are raised by central government and then pushed down by way of budget, of which the UK is in that small group along with Greece. I think Ireland may or may not be, it's on the borderline, but it's not a happy club to belong to. Whereas most of the G20 and the rest of Europe are very comfortable with seeing local, regional government having much greater controls over fiscal and welfare powers. And the countries that are so often heralded these days of Scandinavia, we see approximately the same number of councils. There are, I think, 28 in Norway and just over 30 in Sweden. But there are a couple of hundred municipalities. And even at a municipality level, we see real revenue power, real fiscal powers and welfare powers. So I think if you're looking at examples of how to devolve real responsibility down and matching much to a greater extent spending power with fiscal powers, then there are some very good examples of how that works. And certainly that's something that I think is good for business. We get a better service if we see greater responsibility where the service is delivered from the public sector.
Mm-hmm. And you suggest that it's unlikely that any government at any level will want to take the unpopular decisions if they're not accountable for raising the spend. But is it not the case at the moment that the buck is stopping with our local authorities and they have very little power to address the issues they're facing?
Well, I think it's both popular and unpopular, so that if they can make popular decisions and use the powers that they have in a beneficial way. But I would say there is a bit of a culture at each level of government of saying, well, we've spent what we were supposed to spend, it's not our fault, blame the level of government above. And if the Treasury, the UK Treasury, is responsible for raising all the money, then it's hardly surprising that we all see so many traffic cones coming at us at the beginning of March for people to spend their budgets, because they know that they're incentivised to spend their budgets fully, not incentivised necessarily to provide the best possible service for the public. And that's, after all, what we, whether we're in business or as individuals, really want to see is efficient and effective use of public money to provide public services.
Thank you. I have a specific question from Mr. Andrew too. Do you want to touch on that?
Well, I'd love to. This is an area very close to my heart. I'll give just a little example. An SNP MSP who represents a part of her seat as a remote rural village, and she asked me in some bewilderment why she was no longer, or why the village was no longer allowed to get the local plumber in to fix the public loo. But thanks to procurement, she was obliged, or they were obliged to get a plumber sent up from Glasgow who had to stay a couple of nights over, and they couldn't be got up for a week or two because they were very busy, when the local chap could have done it much cheaper. And that, to me, seems an absolutely classic example of centralisation gone mad. One of the biggest single issues in Scotland, and I'm so sorry it has not been considered in this referendum, is less the issue of powers between Holyrood and Westminster, which in many ways is two bald men. I'll accept, pardon my own thing there, two bald men fighting over a comb, but the distribution of powers within Scotland. And to me, that's a true re-engineering. I mean, I'm a great believer in independence for Scots, but not necessarily for Scotland.
Yeah, I do agree with what you've just said, and I would suggest that you read Andy Whiteman's Renewing Local Democracy in Scotland paper, which was launched last week, because it does touch on those very issues. You say in your submission, and I agree wholeheartedly, the fact that Amazon has been the sole major investment in the book supply industry indicates both a desperate paucity of vision and deep short-termism in thinking. Now, there's a very successful company who potentially could receive some £10 million of public subsidy. Would you like to? Would you be persuaded to move your position to one side or other of the fence if you were to see that kind of investment being directed to small and micro indigenous businesses?
I think that would be a very major factor for me to look at. I think the problem with the Amazon thing, I mean, I have particular issues, obviously, as a publisher with Amazon and their business model. And by the way, one should know, Amazon's a company that never makes a profit. In fact, what small profits it make are usually the result of the state subsidies it's received from the various places it actually opens up. My problem with that subsidy was that that subsidy represents some 2.5–3% off the price of every book sold in Scotland. So immediately, Scottish businesses are massively commercially disadvantaged. We know about Amazon's interesting tax policies. We know about their employment practices too, which are absolutely disgraceful, frankly. But the problem, I think, in Scotland, and it doesn't just go for this administration, it's gone for all administrations in Scotland, is the desperate urge for the big headline that says 2,000 jobs or whatever. We had a similar announcement a few years ago about Sainsbury's in North Lanarkshire. Well, if you open grocery chains, supermarkets, inevitably in a market which is relatively flat, you're taking money away from local traders. And I think this ought to be at the heart of the Scottish Government's investment policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay,
Convener.
thank you. Mr. Rodney?
Yes, if I may, one question for Mr. Thompson. Clearly we're looking at the figures, but it's more than just figures. I mean, we're talking about good democratic governance and not being governed, if you like, by a minority of those elected to London, and also the type of society we aspire to be. Just wondering on that basis, looking at welfare reform, why things like pension credits, you would say, should be retained in Westminster, when, in fact, these decisions are not mutually exclusive from some of the other aspects of welfare reform. How did you arrive at that? Don't you think it would be better that policy on welfare reform in total was exercised by the independent Scottish Government?
I think we took it as a philosophy in this particular submission that that fiscal and welfare powers should follow the level of government for where the spend and responsibility for providing the service lay.
Yeah, but it's not just about figures, is it?
No. So I'm saying, so I'm just saying the basic principle that we used for what we set out there. So if, let us say, the alleviation of poverty, or let's say, make it an easier one, if housing is a local government responsibility, then all the powers around housing, including the fuel allowance or the winter allowance or housing benefits, should actually lie at a local level, because they're the ones who are providing the service. And in that way, and I think Jim in the last session was sort of intimating this around employment, is that then you can produce a holistic approach. If you decide to build a housing scheme with its own heating in it, you can actually decide how you flex that to provide the end service, which is homes for people, so that you actually then have the flexibility to provide the service locally and do it in the way that is right for you locally. So that was the basis of the philosophy. Whether pensions, for instance, should be at a Westminster level or should be at a Scottish level or should be at a local level or should be with the individual is a separate argument, and that isn't related in the paper. But we have just done a pensions paper which has come out today, which I'm very happy to send you, which is pointing out that there is a real problem with pensions in the UK as a whole, and that needs to be addressed. But that might be a bit long, Chairman, as an answer. But I'm very happy to send you the paper, and it will be launched tomorrow morning.
All right, thank you. Christian Allard.
Thank you very much, Governor, and welcome to the committee. Just a question about more powers. I think maybe the Governor could have saved us a bit of time putting everybody together, because the three panels, and yourself included, they all agreed that what we want is more powers. Whatever we want it at local level, what Scottish Parliament level, what we all want is more powers. Now, a yes vote will bring more powers, because it will bring all the powers to Scotland. Now, on a no vote, maybe you might disagree with us, which is strange, but the no, it will bring all the powers that a no vote won't bring. But a no vote, what assurance have we got that it will bring more powers? Particularly when we see Ruth Davidson, who is the leader of the Scottish Conservative, who said that she ruled out, the last line on the sign was she ruled out a cross-party agreement on more powers before the referendum. So we have no assurance that there will be more powers. How do you see this? How do you balance this, especially for some of you who participated to some commissions, for example, like the Calman Commission, that did say, this stipulated that powers, the power of Westminster will still exist to take back power from the Scottish Parliament if needed.
I didn't see the other two panels, but I suspect that nearly everyone from a business community will have been saying that there is good, that they would see the benefits of seeing more fiscal and welfare powers. And that is actually mirrored in the social attitude survey, which shows, I think, respectively, last one was about 58% and 65% of respondents want to see more fiscal and devolved powers across Scotland. I think that your leading question was that should be powers for everything. And I think if one looks at the statements that have come out from Scottish Government and in the White Paper, on particularly about monetary union and border controls and immigration and what's happening in Europe, is actually a recognition that there needs to be a strong union and relationship with our closest business partner in the rest of the UK. I was at a dinner 2 nights ago where John Swinney was actually talking, when talking about monetary union, about fiscal and borrowing controls which needed a degree of sovereignty loss to be able to have those, to have a monetary union. So I'm not saying that, I don't think anyone in the panel is saying that all powers should go to Scotland. They would say that some powers go to Scotland. So
no, what are you saying? That with the assurance, with a yes vote, that we will get most powers to Scotland. But with a no vote, what kind of assurance? You participated to all these debates about devolved max and etc. And we got nowhere. So what kind of assurance?
Well, if you don't have any assurance as yet, but this is the game, isn't it? We've got 7 months before a referendum. Everyone's sort of getting themselves ready for the start line. We've seen the Liberal Democrats come out with, I thought, a very good paper which set out a fiscal federalism home rule, very much along the lines of Devo Plus, which we were setting out. You have seen the Labour Party set up their own commission with Joanne Lamont, who is going to report back next month about further powers, and there certainly have been talk to date about looking at income tax, which is the largest tax currently raised in the UK. And you've seen Tom Strathclyde heading a commission for the Conservatives, which is due to report back, I think, by May is the timetable, though it's not, I don't think it's quite clear quite when that report is coming out. So all 3 parties are talking about more powers. I certainly agree with one of the earlier questions. It would be nice to see them all coming out with a statement of what that means, because that would be clearer for the public. And certainly both Reform Scotland and Devo Plus Group, which I chair, have been calling for exactly that, because I think that would be a healthy part of the debate. And we may find that by the time we reach the referendum, actually the differences from your own party, which is calling for a number of unions, such as the Union of Crowns, Monetary Union, Social Union, Border Controls, might actually not be too far different from the 3 parties' position that is coming up. So
Well, this is a very good point, but it's how can we trust? And particularly if I go to Mr. Shuhandu, you participated, I believe, to the Kalman Commission. I've got some reservation, and can you explain us, is there really the Kalman Commission that power to bring back powers from devolved power back to Westminster?
Well, the Campbell Commission, sometime since I've read it, Christian, the Campbell Commission actually also entrenched suites of powers for a federal parliament. I think one of the greatest single weaknesses in the construction of the Scottish Parliament was that it effectively, your whole suite of powers technically can be pulled back to Westminster. De facto, we know it's not going to happen, but actually we created a clear de jure statement that there was a suite of powers in that would be definitively reserved to Holyrood and could not be touched. I think what we were looking at is a mechanism for discussion within the paper as to whereby powers could be passed backwards and forwards to create some flexibility within certain parameters. So I wouldn't see it as a Trojan horse, as it were, by which Westminster could take powers back. What we were trying to do is recognise that circumstances change, and something that is not an issue now might suddenly appear and be a huge problem. One of the great problems with any constitutional settlement is the danger of making them so rigid that they can't respond. That was the intention. I'm sorry if it didn't necessarily come across that way.
So you wouldn't be in favour of a constitution, for example?
Sorry?
You wouldn't be in favour of a constitution to try to make an assurance that, whatever happens, if we vote no, that powers devolved will stay devolved?
I wouldn't have a problem with that being set down. I've always believed in a Bill of Rights and a clear statement.
Thank you. Nick Mackenzie.
Yes, thanks, Convener. And just following on for this theme, I'm kind of astonished because I'm, aware of Mr. Thompson's position, and don't you feel some disappointment that no political party at the time this was being discussed, when the Scottish Government were saying they were more than willing to consider a third question or a second question on the ballot paper, that not a single one of the opposition parties came forward with some kind of Devil Max type proposal. And in terms of what the Lib Dems have produced recently, that seems to me to represent a significant watering down on the Steele Commission report. And of course, everybody's almost forgotten that report. Aren't you concerned that in the event of a no vote, these reports and so on will just quietly be forgotten about, and really there's nothing on the table from the other parties? So really the only opportunity of meaningful change is the forthcoming referendum with a yes or no vote.
I suppose the proof in the pudding is whether they actually deliver the consensus or they don't deliver consensus, and one would hope that with so we will know by the time of the referendum whether they've actually set out a consensus position. And if you look at what's happened in history, in 1978, the three parties did talk about a further sort of powers, but never really came together with a consensus, and we didn't get delivery. But then in 1999, and also again before the Kalman Commission, all three unionist parties did come together and set out what they were going to do, and by and large they then delivered what they were going to say, they said they were going to do. So if we see the three parties, the three unionist parties, setting out a consensus position, I do then feel that that will then be delivered. The question is whether we will get that, and we will know by the time of the referendum whether we've got that or not. That will be clearly either there or it won't be there.
I mean, I just have to pick you up with a wee point of information, because Carmen recommended devolution of APD, and recognising the compelling case for that, and that hasn't happened, and it's not on the table. So, but if I'm just correct in what you're suggesting, if the three parties get together with some coherent agreement on a set of convincing proposals, then that may influence your vote, but otherwise it would be a yes vote.
And I think I've said this publicly, that I haven't made up my mind yet, but the party that comes closest to Devo Plus, by the time we get to the election, will have my vote.
Okay, thank you.
Just before we leave this, Mark Abiadji wants to come in a different point. What is the problem, Ben Thompson, with Devo Max?
Devo Max was the alternative that the SNP government were really talking about as an alternative to independence, and would have been the third question. Actually, I think there are some problems with Devo Max, and there are two in particular that we don't like. Devo Max is the idea that all tax revenue is raised in Scotland, so all £64 billion worth of public sector expenditure that one did last year would have been raised in Scotland, and then a fee. Currently, the amount that's spent in Westminster is about 40% of that. A fee would have been paid up to Westminster. Now, fundamentally, we think that that's wrong for two reasons. One is that if you have taxes that are being paid up to governments, it also makes the government it's being paid to reliant on a budget and therefore less accountable for the public. We actually like each level of government to be raising the money that they spend. And the second thing is that as long as we're part of a union, where decisions are being made in the United Kingdom, there should be no greater influence from one part of the United Kingdom to another. So let us say that the UK government decides to go to war with Argentina over the Falkland Islands again, and the Scottish government were to say, do you know, we don't agree with that at all, and says, we pay you £4 billion a year towards your defence budget, but because we don't like this war, we're going to hold back £2 billion of it because we don't agree with you. That shouldn't be right if defence is part of a UK decision. We should only have the same representation and rights as any other citizen in the UK. And I think a point that was made by an MP last week was actually it was Scottish MPs and their representation in Westminster that stopped us going to any further in the Syrian conflicts now. So actually, we would like to see our representation influence these matters on a UK-wide basis. So I think, does that answer your question?
Well, okay, well, briefly, because we're getting behind the clock.
So you don't think there's regional disparity just now? And looking at London, that a large part of the decisions, be it financial, defence or what have you, are taken largely with London in mind.
And that is exactly why we would argue for greater fiscal and welfare powers to be devolved down. But on certain matters, like monetary policy, like defence, like foreign affairs, we think actually it is better to have a bigger scale. I'd also argue the other point, which is there is quite a high degree of... We're really talking about decentralisation here. There's quite a high degree of centralisation at Holyrood, and I think we've seen in the last few years the capping of council tax, the controls over business rates, the centralisation of the police away from local policing have all been moves away from taking real power for where the service is actually provided. And if we were applying the same rules, we would like to see powers not only come from Westminster, which can tend to be a little bit south of England focused, to Holyrood, but also then passed down to local government. And this is a step to further devolution of powers, both from Westminster Holyrood, from Holyrood also to local government.
Can I just come in slightly tongue-in-cheek? I think one of the things that's perhaps not been recognised is the remarkable resemblance of Edinburgh in the Scottish economy to London in the UK economy. I'm sitting watching a gigantic bridge rise out the Forth to get more and more traffic into a city when I still have to drive on a single-track road up to Inverness. You talk of the financial sector in London. Well, Edinburgh's financial sector is vast, including a bank on such a scale that it could probably, its collapse could bring down a Scottish economy, and indeed came perilously close to doing a UK economy. So I think we have to recognise in a Scottish context that we are replicating many of the issues within Scotland. Many of the issues in the UK are actually replicated in a smaller scale within Scotland.
Right, thanks. Okay, I need to bring in Marco Biaggi, who's been very patient. Yeah.
Thank you, and apologies for directing this to Mr Thompson. I think the paper he submitted might have been a blue touch paper of getting us to ask things. It's about policy distinctiveness here, because we've heard from other members concerns about greater policy distinctiveness in Scotland, but the paper that you put forward and the Devo Plus suggestion would have policy distinctiveness at a Scottish level over, for example, capital gains, stamp duty, VAT, corporation tax in particular, all of which have major implications for businesses. Is it therefore your view that the benefits of that policy distinctiveness, having it at a Scottish level, outweigh those extra issues for businesses?
Well, I mean, I think, I think that having local taxes, whether at a local level or at a Scottish level, enables people at those levels to be able to create taxes that are efficient for the sorts of businesses that they have in those areas. I'm not sure if we didn't have room to supply it, but we have a very good table which shows the different types of taxation and how they're raised in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK. And so for our major industries like oil and gas, like whisky, like financial services, there are taxes that are particularly that we can do to encourage business to either to do startups or to encourage businesses in the areas that we're strong at, which may be very different from those businesses in the southeast of England. So, for instance, there's not much debate in Scotland about the importance of non-dom taxes, whereas it's an issue that causes great concern down in Westminster because it's very important to the southeast of England. So those are the taxes that would give business people good levers. And at the end, what are we trying to achieve? We are trying to achieve an environment that is good for business in each of the locations within the UK and within Scotland. And to give them financial levers that can help the businesses in their areas is a positive.
Can I then throw this out to the other members, because some of you have mentioned areas where policy distinctiveness might be a problem for your businesses, usually concerns about possible negative consequences. But there's the opportunity at Scottish level, if we have that policy distinctiveness, to make positive benefits for your companies as well. So are there any areas you've thought about in that regard? And perhaps Hugh Andrew might be a good person to start, given that you've highlighted competition policy within your submission.
Yes. Well, I mean, can I just come in on the tax issue? I think too often we look at big picture tax things, corporation tax and so on. Well, yes, Ireland cut corporation tax 12.5%. It created a headquarters-opoly economy, but these headquarters didn't necessarily create real organic growth. A very persuasive argument to me would be not corporation tax, but a cut in employers' national insurance. What a business like myself needs is marginal gains in competitiveness. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, but over time, marginal gains add up to an enormous amount for us. I think too often in politics there's a tendency to go for the big headline thing, and I think we should look at the small, boring things much more. I think the weakness in, the competition policy in Scotland has been a huge problem. The OFT can look at local monopolies within Scotland, but yet curiously cannot consider Scotland as an entity, and I think all parties should take that on board.
And others, things you would like to see in the Scottish Government?
I would have to say from an SDI perspective, I've had a lot of support from SDI, which has been great. What I am a little bit concerned about is the funding that they may receive through UKTI, perhaps, that may not, we need to increase excuse me, the staffing perhaps with SDI and make sure that the same amount of grant funding was available to SMEs in the future, and then that would be a good thing, obviously. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made that obviously some of the powers being in Scotland is a good thing, but just to make sure that the same sort of levels of funding are available for SMEs, if not more, ideally more. And the cut in NI, I agree with, obviously pensions coming in, it's great if we all want to benefit our employees and pay them more, it'd be great if we could in an ideal world, but we're all struggling in the current economy, current conditions, and anything that can help to hire more employees would be great.
I think actually the SDI point is a great point, because for a business like ours, an international business, funding and support from both SDI and SE is absolutely crucial. In the past year, I've watched funds from both SE and SDI go from 50% intervention rates to 30%, which has caused us some problems in the past year. And it would be great to see this level increased a little bit more, and especially we do have some investment for businesses that don't have any investment. Then there's occasions they just cannot attend events or go places because intervention rates are just not high enough. I think one of the issues for me as well is skills, and I just see lots of skills being lost in Scotland, particularly from scientists that are leaving, women who really can't sustain their careers and pay for childcare in order to support that. And we are losing lots of women. If you think about who have done their degrees, PhDs, and then been trained in postdoctoral labs for many years, and they're really quite falling away. And that's something that I think really needs to be addressed, because we're not going to be able to compete internationally or get entrepreneurs or scientists out of there unless we address that issue.
And can I just ask as well, you've highlighted in business support, childcare and so on, would your line of business be helped by research and development tax credits as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something now that is a real focus for us, is to, you know, obviously when it comes to accounts, is like, where can we pull back money from that? Because for us, a substantial portion of our budget will be to generate technologies extremely quickly, and we have to move fast on that, but we must get that money back in order to support that development. So it's R&D tax credits are crucial for us, but also to look at what are the rates for small businesses compared to perhaps larger businesses. And I did take part in a Westminster committee last year looking at that, thinking about should this change and should this evolve a little bit to support businesses that are smaller, that need that more rather than larger businesses.
Okay, I think the clock's probably beaten us, so if, I don't see anybody else catching my eye, so it's a good point to finish. Can I thank you all very much for coming along? It's been very helpful to the committee to get your views. I'm very grateful to you for answering our questions. We're now going to suspend very briefly, just allow the changeover, and the members could just stay where they are for a very brief discussion in private. Thank you.